One. Good evening, everyone. We will begin our Canby Planning Commission with a call to order, and we will start with a Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. First up are consent items for this evening. The first will be draft meeting minutes from February 24th, 2025. Do we have a motion on the draft meeting minutes?
I move we accept the draft meeting minutes from February 24th, 2025.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the ayes have it. We will adopt the draft meeting minutes from February 24th, 2025 as written. Next consent item is draft final findings for DR 24-02 and PAR 24-03, the Boyer Industrial Park. Do we have a motion on the draft final findings?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the final findings for DR 25-02 and PAR 2403 as submitted.
Do we have a second?
I second this, Judy.
Thank you, Judy. We'll go by roll call vote for the draft final findings, starting with Commissioner Driscoll.
Aye.
Commissioner Llewellyn.
Aye.
I'm an aye. Commissioner Jarosh is an aye, correct?
Yes.
Vice Chair Commissioner Ewert.
Aye.
Commissioner Hutchinson.
Aye.
Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
And the ayes have it. The draft final findings, DR 24-02, PAR 24-03, Boyer Industrial Park are approved as written. Next up is citizen input on non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on non-agenda items. Each person will be given 3 minutes to speak. Staff and the Planning Commission will make every effort to respond to the questions raised during citizens' input before the meeting ends or as quickly as possible thereafter. You may also speak on non-agenda items via Zoom. Do we have any citizen input on non-agenda items?
We do not this time.
Very well. Number 4 on the list here is old business. We have none. New business, also none. And that takes us to our public hearing section of the evening. Tonight, there is a matter before the hearing body that requires a public hearing. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. All written testimony received both for and against shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the other land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision makers and the parties the opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Conflict of interest. At this time, I would like to ask any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest to please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. Beginning with Commissioner Driscoll.
None.
Commissioner Jarosh.
No conflict.
Commissioner Llewellyn.
No conflict.
And I have no conflict. Vice Chair Ewert,
No conflict.
Commissioner Hutchinson,
No conflict.
and Commissioner Ellison.
No conflict.
Very well. Ex parte contact. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time. Beginning with Commissioner Driscoll.
A site visit prior to the meeting, no conflict otherwise.
Commissioner DeRoche.
None.
Commissioner Llewellyn.
No conflict, none.
And I have none. Vice Chair Ewert.
I visited the site, drew no conclusions.
Commissioner Hutchinson.
I live in the neighborhood and pass by the site regularly. Other than knowing where it sits in Canby's comprehensive plan, I have no conclusions.
Commissioner Ellison.
No conflict.
Very well. Seeing that, let's see, does any member of the audience have any question for any commissioner regarding ex parte contact that you've heard just now? No? All right, seeing no questions or concerns, the public hearing will be conducted as follow. Staff will present, and then we will have questions, if any, by the hearing body for staff. And then the chair will open the public hearing for testimony. Applicant will have 20 minutes to present. The proponents will have 3 minutes. Opponents will have 3 minutes. And any rebuttals will have 10 minutes. And at that time, the chair will close the public hearing. Questions, if any, by the hearing body, and discussion, if any, by the hearing body. And at that point, a decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions about the procedures of the hearing? Nope. Okay. Awesome. Moving on to our first hearing, which is sub 24-01, Dahlia Glen subdivision, presented by Emma Porcolo, Associate Planner. Emma, you're up.
Good evening, Commissioners. As said by the Chair, I am here to present subdivision application 2401 for the Dahlia Glen subdivision. So to get you familiar with the site, this site may be familiar to you all. This came forward for an annexation several months back, right before the holidays. The site address is 1733 North Holly Street. It is shown here on this map, outlined in this light blue color. The site currently has one single-family home on it, along with several accessory structures. Adjacent uses include residential across the street of North Holly is several new R1 residential single-family homes in the Dodds Farm subdivision, as well as a larger residential property just to the south there on the corner of Territorial and Holly. And then the remaining surrounding area is currently in agricultural farm use. North Holly Street, which is abutting the frontage of the site, is a county road currently, but the frontage for the site was brought into the city through the annexation process that it recently went through. And here I have referenced the annexation and zone change number for the site. Upon annexation, the site was zoned R1 low density residential zoning, which is our lowest density residential zone. So familiarizing you all more a little bit with the area, the site is now zoned R1, as I mentioned. Surrounding areas, except for the North Holly frontage, is all unincorporated and is Clackamas County zoning. It has EFU, exclusive farm use zoning. Across the street are 2 residential zones, city R1 zoning, as well as county RRF5, rural residential zoning. This property, as we discussed with the annexation, was part of the North Holly Development Concept Plan. That Development Concept Plan is a requirement of annexation, and the concept plan was completed in 2019. It is pertinent to this application because it sets some of the expectations around where utilities, streets, and services will go. So it is a guiding and conceptual plan for this application. This here provides an overview of what is proposed for this application. So the subdivision is proposed to have 16 lots, as you see here. All of the lots are around 7,000 to 8,000, or just under 8,000 square feet. There's one east-west road connection shown here as Northwest 16th Avenue that is proposed, connecting to North Holly Street. There's also two pedestrian multi-use pathways proposed on the north and south side of Northwest 16th Street, as well as an emergency vehicle turnaround. That will be temporary until Northwest 16th Avenue is punched through and eventually connected to other streets to allow an emergency vehicle to exit via Northwest 16th Avenue and not have to take the Holly exit. This here is a list of applicable criteria for the application. As a reminder, this is a subdivision application just to subdivide the land. This doesn't approve development on that land. The development on the land is regulated by the zone. And so this here shows the list of the applicable criteria. The R1 dimensional standards for the site are shown here. Allowed use, so as I mentioned, no development is proposed or approved under this, no development is approved under this application. However, 16 lots of single-family dwellings are proposed, and the applicant has shared their intent to build single-family dwellings on the property. However, all uses in the R1 zone that are permitted uses are allowed on the site. The minimum lot area requirement in the R1 zone is 7,000 square feet. The lot sizes range from 7,002 to 7,465. So that meets the code standard. And all of the properties proposed meet the 60-foot lot frontage requirement. This plan here shows the outline of the required setbacks for all of the proposed lots. So the dashed lines show the buildable area that's permitted on each of the lots. It also shows the location of the two pathways, as well as it shows the right-of-way dedication that will be provided on North Holly Street. So transportation, a traffic analysis letter was completed for the property. It did not trigger the amount of trips required to complete a traffic impact analysis because there's 10 a.m. and 14 p.m. net trips. So that includes the trips vested to the property with the house. Based on the number of houses proposed, thus a TAL was completed, the analysis letter, which requires a half-street improvement on North Holly Street and full improvements of the new local road being Northwest 16th Avenue. The pedestrian pathways that I've mentioned are proposed in order to meet the block length standard. Because the property exceeds the block length standard, this is proposed in lieu of that. So it allows there to still be connections and to people to be able to connect to the adjacent development if and when it happens, but not with the street. And so I will get into the street layout proposed in the next slide here. So as you may all recall, the North Holly DCP proposed both an east-west street as well as a stub to the south that you can see on this yellow highlighted area. In initial conversations about the proposed project with the applicant, the city identified several concerns with that stub to the south. Through the annexation process, it was recommended that that stub be removed, and we discussed that in detail through the annexation process. There are concerns about safety of the proposed spacing if that stub was to connect to Northwest Territorial Street. Thus, it has been recommended that it connect elsewhere and the stub be removed. That was also a recommendation that went in front of City Council and was approved by City Council. So in lieu of a connection from the stub that's shown on the property, let's see if I can. The red star here shows a connection at North Grant Street. That is the proposed intersection in lieu of the connection, which would be Hawthorne, which is where the stub showed a connection. So that is where the connection is recommended based on the evaluation that staff completed with planning staff, with public works staff, as well as with DKS, our traffic consultant. Additionally, we understand that there's broader impacts and more connections to be had throughout that entire area that is currently unincorporated in the future. And that street network and how it connects to the proposed development would be worked out through conceptual planning when that property is located in the UGB. However, it is not currently located in the UGB. This here shows the proposed parking, both on-street and private parking for all of the lots. Single-family homes require 2 parking spaces per home, so this proposed plan adequately meets and shows that there's a clear ability to meet that requirement, as well as it meets the spacing standard from the driveway to the intersection on North Holly Street, which requires a minimum of 30 feet. It also shows the typical cross-section, which will allow on-street parking, as shown in the green cars on this image, and 6-foot sidewalks, which is the city's standard for local streets. This here is the North Holly right-of-way proposed. So as I mentioned, North Holly is still a county street, although it is now located in the city, or this area of North Holly Street is now located in the city. So the design considered both what is required by the county as well as city standards. So the sidewalks are 6 feet to meet the city standards, but the right-of-way dedication is to meet city standards, and as well as to, has been mirrored to copy what was done with Dodds subdivision. That is also has its frontage on North Holly. Following the publication of the staff report, there was one public comment received. So I wanted to be sure to share it with you all. So I'll just take a moment here to let everyone read the public comment. So if everyone has had a chance to read it, I will go on to some other amendments following the published staff report. Oh, I apologize. Yes, I can read it aloud. So the public comment says, "Thank you for your opportunity to make a comment on the Dahlia Glen subdivision, which would turn a 3.39 acre property into a 16-lot subdivision. As a Canby resident, I am opposed to the proposal for practical, historical, and aesthetic reasons. On practical grounds, the subject site appears to have one ingress and egress on North Holly Street only. This appears to be a public safety problem and a potential fire hazard. An emergency vehicle turnaround does not sufficiently address the expeditious public safety and fire response. Aesthetically, this acreage and the surrounding area represent one of the few remaining pastoral views that characterizes the small town feel that Canby residents appreciate and enjoy. A 16-lot subdivision would certainly mar this aesthetic. It would be refreshing to see the city advocate for a balance between development and central and defining ethos that represent the feeling of Canby living. Historically, Canby is a farm town. Let's have a city planning department that seeks to preserve that history. Thank you for your consideration, Daniel Garris." So one comment I will add on this is that there was concerns about the fire access. However, the proposed turnaround does meet the conditions of construction that is provided by Canby Fire. So conditions of approval, in total, there are 64 conditions of approval provided in this application. Most are standard conditions. You will note that condition number 23 is blank. That was a formatting error, so consider that null. Pedestrian pathways are to be privately maintained. That was a request by the city that there be an HOA to maintain those pedestrian paths. You'll see that in condition 51. The emergency vehicle turnaround is addressed in conditions number 3 and 4. The emergency vehicle turnaround will need to be free and clear at all times to ensure there is adequate space for emergency response and there is no intrusions in their need to perform their duties. And the city and Canby Fire will work with the applicant to ensure proper markers and any blockages that need to take place to ensure that that can remain free and clear. And it dictates that the plat will discuss what happens to the emergency turnaround once there is a road connection and it is no longer necessary. And I have a few amendments to the conditions of approval that were published in the staff report, which I'm going to get into here on the next slide. So the first revision is to condition number 29, and this is to reduce the right-of-way width required on North Holly Street from 35 to 32 feet to match adjacent development. This was a request by the applicant who intended to do North Holly Street improvements to match the Dodds subdivision Holly Street improvements, which meet the 32 feet. They discussed it with Clackamas County Engineering. This is a condition that was provided by them. The county was in agreement with that and provided an updated condition, which you see here. So the dedication is 12 feet, which would allow a 32-foot half-street right-of-way. So that is the first amendment. The second amendment is to condition number 63, and that is a condition regarding fencing. And this is to revise, allow additional fencing because of unique circumstances for the site. So the condition as originally written was basically to convey that the property needs to meet the city's standard fencing requirements on the site, and gave a bit of a description for them of where 3-foot tall and 6-foot tall fencing, as well as vision clearance requirements. The proposed revised condition of approval is to propose that the fencing along North Holly Street be allowed up to the property line. This would both match what Dodds subdivision currently has and would accommodate for the fact that North Holly Street is a minor arterial under the county requirements, or sorry, county standards, and is a collector street for the city and is a very well-traveled street. So it would just provide more privacy and separation from that traffic for the properties. It would allow a 6-foot fence at the property line. However, the 20-foot setback, front setback of the house would need to still remain free of the 6-foot tall fence. And so I provided a bit of a visual here. So when talking about Dodds has a 6-foot fence along the entire property, but those are all rear yards that are facing North Holly Street, where in this case, these are street side yards that are facing North Holly Street. So we still would require the front yard setback to be clear of all 6-foot tall fencing, as well as meet vision clearance requirements. So everything, the sections of the corner lots here outlined in yellow would not be allowed to have 6-foot tall fences, but the blue shows the shifting of where usually your side yard fence needs to be at a 15-foot setback at minimum. It will be then pushed to where the sidewalk meets the private yard. Based on everything provided in my application and on the submitted facts and findings and conclusions in the staff report, planning staff recommend that Planning Commission approve application subdivision 2401, subject to the identified conditions of approval. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Emma. Do we have the applicant presenting as well?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Sorry. I skipped ahead. You're right. All right, so do we have any questions from Planning Commission for Emma?
I have a couple questions, Emma. So why does this need to be approved as a hypothetical subdivision layout rather than an actual proposal for development?
It is a subdivision application authorizes that you subdivide the land. You have to first have the lots to be what they need to be before you could approve the application to build a house in it. So this is just a standard process that you follow with subdivisions.
Okay. And the point of the pedestrian paths, what's the future vision for that and their location within the subdivision plan?
Can
The
you?
pedestrian paths, so they're just kind of random. They are two homes in on the upper portion and 4 or 5 in on the bottom. Does that fit into a specific plan for future development? It seems a little bit random, just looking at it as a standalone.
So as I mentioned previously, the area surrounding that section of the site. Basically, everything surrounding the site that is not the North Holly frontage is unincorporated at this time. So we don't know, we haven't conceptually planned what that area will look like. However, in determining that street stub layout and how, we did a little bit of very preliminary conceptual planning to see how do we think things will shake out in that area. Again, it was very preliminary, and so that's where the locations of those pedestrian pathways are based off of. And I believe the applicant has a really good visual in their presentation that can better convey that. But it is a guesstimate on kind of what we think will happen around it right now, but there's only so much that we can go off of based on what we know where our current streets are, because that surrounding area is not yet in the UGB, so it would be premature to plan it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, more or less. Thank you.
Commissioner Jarosh, anything? Commissioner Llewellyn?
I guess I would just, we're talking about bringing in expanding the UGB on this stuff, and it goes back to that same argument we had a few months ago. I'd like to see more vision on this, especially on the roads as we go forward here, if those properties come in. So that's one of my concerns.
So Craig, maybe Dawn can speak a little bit more, but, once a property comes into the UGB, then there's an opportunity to do conceptual planning, but there's kind of one more step to get there before we will start doing conceptual planning.
Commissioner Llewellyn, just a bit more on that. So it's a bit uncertain which properties actually will come into the urban growth boundary. That's still being sorted. But let's say that those are intended, that the property to the west is intended to come into the urban growth boundary. That process will unfold in what's called concept planning. The city has received a $250,000 grant from Oregon Department of Transportation to start concept planning. So if that property is included in that, it will be part of that evaluation. That will show more specific road networks in there. This application, I just want to separate this a bit because this property is currently in the city limits through the annexation process. We're just forecasting that the road system would end up going east to west across this property into that property if it does become part of the urban growth boundary. The biggest thing I think we're trying to come across here tonight is the applicant is not obligated to do anything beyond the frontage improvements on Holly and build the road through the subdivision that they're building. But we are looking at this more holistically in terms of the layout of where that road may end up connecting, and the spacing where it was shown as a stub previously would not meet access spacing requirements for safety and transportation. It would create a bottleneck on territorial and an unsafe condition. So what we're simply saying is that east-west route without the stub would end up providing the safety by looking at that in the future, and the fulfillment of that would be through the conceptual planning, which would end up going through Grant Street. That's if, in fact, that property does become part of the urban growth boundary expansion. Many layers still to be done over the next several years to figure that out. This is not a near-term solution, but hopefully that's helpful in the context here. We're dealing with a specific piece of property and the circulation through that property that would likely connect through that property. If it's included in that, if the boundaries expanded, it would be part of that process. But we're not obligating this property to do more than essentially look at the connectional points that go through it.
Yeah, I guess I just worry about this. I mean, it's piecemealing is what we're doing, and we just get into problems when this happens. So I worry about that.
No, and good point. I mean, the conceptual planning is the reason we have the grant is to go through that exercise so we avoid some of the historical issues I think you personally have encountered, which is not having a plan for where access, utilities, et cetera, are happening when additional property is brought into the city.
That's all I got.
Thank you, Commissioner Llewellyn. Vice Chair Ewert, any comments, questions?
In your discussions with the applicant, was there any talk about possibly saving any of those beautiful trees that are on the property?
Unfortunately, there's no requirement in order to do so. As always, we, encourage applicants to preserve as much as possible. But unfortunately, there's no requirements, and it's a residential application with clear and objective
This
standards.
didn't tick anything for a arborist study or anything in that nature?
Not per our
Okay.
code, no.
So probably the biggest question I have with this, and it kind of goes a little bit along with what Commissioner Llewellyn was talking about, on the west side of this property, where you talked about Grant, where the intersection, your little, can you go back to that slide? Perfect. So Grant Street, that being our intersection that we're looking at, and when you go out and visually look at the property, I went out there and looked at it. It looks to me like if Grant Street will continue straight on through, which we would presume that it probably would. My question would be, has anybody looked at any kind of a layout so that we get a straight street there? So has anybody gone out and looked at, kind of, I get this picture, and when you stand there and look at it, it almost looks like the property line, and I can't quite tell where the property line is. There's that shop building that's on there that's going to go away and whatnot, but it looks like the property line pretty much lays in what would be the center of Grant Street. And so I'm kind of curious, did anybody go out and look at that so that we can move forward in the future and not have a street that has one of these little goofy little jogs in it like so many of our streets do? This is called planning, so I'm just wondering if we have looked at that.
So the current conceptual vision, again, very conceptual, is actually that, through that intersection, Grant will kind of veer to the left slightly along the axis or angle that that tall property is right on the northwest corner of Territorial and assumed Grant intersection. We initially flagged this at the pre-app for the annexation and this subdivision application. And so once we flagged it, city staff, planning and both public works started to look into this. And we decided to spend some time looking into what could the street network look like, and we used the city engineer to start to do some very conceptual, knowing, what's our street spacing, where do streets go, how wide do streets need to be. So we used the city engineer, who's very familiar with the city and with the area, to do that very conceptual, to understand where things could go and what's a reasonable layout to see. Again, it was a very preliminary and is not by any means a complete conceptual plan. So they did look into that, and that really yielded that this was the best approach, because ultimately it does yield the most amount of options for the future. With that one road connection east-west, there is possibilities for where Grant Street and other connections can go versus creating a north-south connection now. You could limit things in the future. So this is the most flexible option for the future in terms of the surrounding areas. In terms of the curvature of the streets, we actually did review this with Public Works several times, and they were involved in that conceptual discussion, and they actually preferred this connection because of the way it was slightly angled, but they said they preferred it and that the street sweeper could maneuver better in the way that the street layout was proposed. So they did not have concerns and actually preferred this type of layout.
Just to add to what Emma's saying, there was conceptual design for your concern on, the alignment. I would not say that that is construction level, but it was drawn out in street network layout. Again, that's part of this conceptual planning that we're going to be doing in the future, but I believe it can be put into a situation where hopefully there's no weird offset that you're talking about there. But there was our city engineer did actually lay this out in terms of what conceptually that would look like if that property were brought into the city's boundary.
Okay, so I guess my point is in planning of this, and I'm not convinced of the the private walkway thingies that we got going on in here, I know that's not a very sophisticated term, but we'll call them thingies for right now. They don't go anywhere. And will they go anywhere when something else develops? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I guess that I would like to see us possibly give up those walkways if it means that we can get a straight street in there down in the future. It just seems to me like we would, I would rather have that land taken off those N2 lots or added to whatever we need to do there to get a straight continuity of street going through there. It just seems like that would make sense to me.
So we did look at that at one point, and that's what the stub originally was for. But in evaluating it, it was so that area right underneath, let's see if I can get this to work. Sorry, Matt. So this area here right underneath, once you start to try and put a road through it, because this intersection is not recommended based on queuing and traffic volumes, we believe that this intersection here would be unsafe to allow this intersection. So to put a road connection here, you have to create a cul-de-sac, and it was really a really bad use of the space, truthfully, to build a cul-de-sac there.
That's not what I'm talking about. What
Okay.
I'm talking about is.
Grant Street, north-south?
Sorry, folks. This street that goes through here, if we had to shift the lots this way, get rid of those walkways, so
Oh,
that
I
we have
see.
enough room to put that street through in the future, I'd rather do that than have some walkways, pathways that don't go anywhere.
Well, I think what Public Works is looking at is how Elm intersects with Territorial. It's at a 90 degrees, and I think that their equipment deals better with intersections that are at 90 degrees, which is probably why they're looking at Grant, saying that the offset actually works for them, because then
That
on the
is
north
Grant.
side of Territorial, the way Grant would hit it squarely and then veer more to follow the property line.
Right.
So, I think what they're hoping for is an intersection more like on North Elm hitting Territorial, as opposed to an intersection like, Grant hits Territorial. But that's just my guessing, knowing how heavy equipment likes to come into driveways. When you have an acute angle and an obtuse angle, coming at it from one direction is more difficult.
Okay, that's fine. I just don't, we need to access whatever is going to develop in here, and whatever the street is, the one you were just talking about, Emma.
Grant.
Not Grant, the next one up
Oh,
is too close.
Hawthorne,
So
yeah.
Grant is going to be our option. I'm just saying that if we approve the subdivision, it would be nice if somebody could maybe go out there with a transit or something and kind of get an idea of where Grant Street is going to go straight on through. So if now we have to sacrifice those pedestrian walkway, pathway, feel-good things to get the street width that we need in the future, might be 20 years. I'll probably be pushing up daisies by the time it happens, but you know what? It's something that we need to look. Nothing we do is going to happen right now. Well, this is actually going to probably happen pretty quick. So we need to look to what the future is going to look like. And I think that I understand what we're saying about whether we like that intersection or not. I don't know how much difference that's going to make. That's one of our only accesses in there until you get down to Elm. And then you're going to have, that's going to be kind of an odd one too if we straighten it out. So I just think that's something we should think about now. I'd rather have the street width available to us than have some pathways in the subdivision. Seems like that would just make sense to me. And that's all I got.
Commissioner Hutchinson.
Except for what I said in response, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Commissioner Ellison.
I wanted to, you asked about the trees, and something
flagged in my head and I found it. They have a tree table and there's over 120 trees and all of them are being removed except for one is marked to be preserved, just so you know. I had a question, it's very minor. I just honestly was shocked and just wanted clarification. On the parking, they have the green cars on the street parking and the yellow cars in the driveway. Are they, you can legitimately fit 6 cars in the driveway? Is that what I'm seeing?
So my assumption here is that they assumed that if our maximum driveway width for a single-family home, if you have a 3-car garage, is 28 feet wide. So generally,
Okay.
that's about 3 cars. So
Okay.
that could also be, assuming that some of that's in a garage. We do require, at least 19 feet of spacing between your garage and the sidewalk, so that 1 full car could fit. So 3 could be
Yeah.
in a garage and 3 could be on the
Okay,
street.
I was trying to
or
find the
on
measurements to get a better
Yeah.
idea and I couldn't track it down. Okay, thank you.
And I think the planning commission is used to saying much smaller lots. These are big lots. They are large lots.
Yeah, I was just shocked. I was like, holy cow, cool, but just making sure it's real. Thank you, that's it.
Okay, before we open it to the applicant, one more round. Any commissioners have any other comments or questions before we do that?
Just to Commissioner Ewert's concerns, if they do move it over, then I don't think they'd have a place to turn around. And if they added something to turn around elsewhere, then the lots would probably be under the minimum for R1, because they're all so close right now. So I guess it would just. I mean, it could be less lots, but.
I think if they moved the lots down, kept the same size, just moved them down, they could put their little walkway turnaround thingamajigger at the end of the subdivision, so the fire department could turn around down there. And because the only reason the fire department wants that is because the street doesn't go through.
Yep,
And so at such time that they would develop the street,
rebuild it into something
then it
else
would
if need
become a
be.
moot point.
Fair, thank you.
Okay, at this time, we will open, no, we won't?
The applicant, yeah.
Yeah, we'll open the testimony to the applicant for a presentation. Great. Come on up, applicant.
Hello there. Just get set up here real quick. Alrighty. Good evening, and thank you for your time. My name is Marie Holliday with AKS Engineering and Forestry, and for the record, my address is 12965 Southwest Herman Road, Suite 100, Tualatin, Oregon 97062. And up for your consideration this evening is the Dahlia Glen subdivision. Again, my name
Might
is
need to
Marie.
move closer to the mic.
There you go. Yeah, you can drag
Thank
it.
you.
Do I have to press a button as well?
Yeah, it's on.
Is that better, Commissioner?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Consider the average age of the people in the room here.
Speak for yourself.
Again, my name is Marie Holliday with AKS Engineering, presenting on behalf of the applicant Venture Properties. AKS Engineering provided land use planning, civil engineering, and some other services shown there on the screen. There is a representative from Venture Properties here this evening, as well as our project engineer, Darko Simic, who will be available for discussion if necessary. So diving right into the project view, the property is generally located in the northwest quadrant of the city. It should look familiar because it was recently annexed and applied with city zoning just recently in 2024. So now the city limits extend around the northwest and south perimeters of the site, but the remainder of the property to the west is still outside the UGB and within Clackamas County. The total project area is 3.39 acres, and this subdivision is the next phase of the development. So again, the property was recently annexed and applied with city zoning, which is low-density residential, and staff recommended approval in their staff report, and this evening is the Planning Commission decision. As discussed with the recent adopted annexation and zone change, the property is within the North Holly Development Concept Plan. The tentative subdivision implements and complies with the framework of the DCP. On the screen there, you can see the boundaries of the DCP. This property is blown up out of the south quadrant there. So you can see that the original street network was planned with a street extended through to the west. You can see that street stub there that Emma touched on a little bit ago, as well as one pedestrian pathway that provided connection to the north. You can see here there's a framework of other developments and neighborhoods within this DCP. Some have been recently built out, including Dodds Farm subdivision, which is just across the street from this project. And then I've also highlighted a future city park that has been dedicated and is located there central to the DCP. An image of the Dahlia Glen subdivision is on the screen. The property is zoned R1, low-density residential, which allows a minimum lot size of 7,000 square feet. There are 16 lots planned for future single-family detached homes. Generally, the layout starts from North Holly Street there, and a public street is extended to the west through the subdivision. That street is called Northwest 16th Avenue. With this street will come provision of sewer, water, and franchise utilities, as well as stormwater infrastructures in the form of dry wells. There is 12 feet of right-of-way dedication planned on North Holly Street. As Emma mentioned, that's a Clackamas County jurisdiction over the roadway, but the dedication is per city standards as well as county standards. It's a bit mixed together, so we provide, or the project provides the city level of improvements, and until jurisdiction is facilitated back to the city, it'll remain under Clackamas County jurisdiction. Extension of the local public street network and those new pedestrian pathways for future connectivity. There's an emergency vehicle turnaround on the north end of the street there. You can see it in between lots 6 and 5. That emergency vehicle turnaround is planned in accordance with that multi-use pathway. So in the future, when Northwest 16th Avenue, if it punches through and the UGB is expanded, that emergency vehicle turnaround would be taken out of use. And the way that it's planned, there's no real removal of improvements needed, basically bollards and some other things. But as it stands, that the design is so that nothing would have to be removed in the future. Street trees, landscape planters, and are planned along Northwest 16th Avenue there, as well as North Holly Street. And 6-foot perimeter fencing is planned around the perimeter of the subdivision. So that 6 feet fence would be along the north, west, and south property lines, as well as the east property lines, just up to that frontage and not to impede sight distance and access. Each single-family lot meets the required 60-foot wide 60-foot wide frontage standard and is provided a 28-foot wide driveway. So each home will accommodate 6 spaces. So you can see here, the 28-foot wide driveways come off of Northwest 16th Avenue. There will be approximately 3 available parking spaces there. And then the lots could accommodate a future home that could allow for a 3-car garage. So approximately 6 spaces per dwelling are provided off-site, which amounts to 96 off-street spaces. And those are all shown with the orange cars. And then on-street, there are 22 available on-street parking spaces, and that's basically seen as any spaces in between the driveways and to not impede sight distance. So 22 on-street and 96 off-street, so a plethora of available parking, and there is no parking allowed on North Holly Street because it's a minor arterial. So here we got into some discussion with some commissioners here on the design of the pedestrian pathways. And so now that we've discussed the subdivision overview, I'd like to shed some light here on the pedestrian design. Through preliminary coordination with the City Public Works and City's Transportation Engineer, DKS Associates, the city's preferred transportation concept is shown there on the screen. So you can see just south of the project boundary that's shown in orange, there's a little pinch point of land that exists in between Territorial and Holly Street. And so if we were to implement a street stub down to the south, it wouldn't necessarily meet access spacing, and again, it would create those queuing issues that we're seeing through that preliminary concept planning. With that said, all of this area west of the property is currently outside of the UGB, which means that the city doesn't need to provide urban planning for that area until it's brought into the urban growth boundary and the city limits. And so with that said, we are providing future stubs for connection of utilities and public utilities and connection points. But again, this property is currently within city limits, and so all we can do is meet the city standards and the subdivision standards and work with the land that is provided on this site. So you can see there that Grant Street connection was spoken about. That's just west of the property boundary. And so you can see there that that turning movement is still providing a connection to a future intersection. It's just not within the property boundaries. And I'm happy to come back to this later, but again, this is all kind of prefaced on that pinch point of land that's just south of the property. And the purple dots there shown are the pedestrian connections. So you can see there that pedestrians would be able to walk along both sides of Northwest 16th Avenue, connecting possibly in the future to the north, and then as well to the east, and then further south through that future cul-de-sac bulb and out to Northwest Territorial. So here's a little bit of that concept planning that we've been discussing, and I'm happy to come back to it if there's more questions. On the topic of transportation, DKS Associates prepared the transportation impact analysis. As noted on page 5 of the staff report, the subdivision adequately addresses each transportation approval criteria and livability measure. So I don't want to go into too incredible of detail here, but the planned subdivision will not create a significant impact on the transportation system. It's consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and transportation system planning documents. And DKS did not recommend any measures beyond right-of-way dedication, construction of the public street system, again, the frontage improvements along North Holly Street there, and then future payment of the transportation system development charges. Here on the screen is the perimeter fencing detail. You can see a photo. That photo is just taken from the property facing east across Holly Street. So that's the existing fencing for Dodds Farm subdivision. The applicant proposed a 6-foot wooden fence enhanced with masonry pillars every 4th panel, which is about every 32 feet. And it's designed to be aesthetically consistent with that existing fencing along Dodds Farm. And the hope is that it'll improve livability for these future residents. Again, their side yard is going to be facing a minor arterial, and anyone with kids and dogs, you would like a fence greater than 3 feet where you can. And this is associated with that revised condition of approval number 63 that Emma touched on. So this subdivision will provide benefits to the community, including implementing the city's land use pattern vision for the area. We've heard how it will unlock the southwest portion of the North Holly Development Concept Plan. It's already within the city's UGB, and it was recently annexed through Annexation 24-01. This subdivision will provide needed housing consistent with the Canby Comprehensive Plan. As you're aware, the city is currently expanding their UGB to provide needed housing during this regional housing crisis, and so this property is already within the city limits and slated for urban development. It'll provide infrastructure improvements and connections, including right-of-way dedication, physical roadway improvements, extension of public services, including stub to the west property line there for future UGB expansion. And then the project will also provide system development charges. Some of those will go to transportation and other city services, as well as city parks. As you saw on that Holly DCP plan, there's an existing park planned in this area, and so the owner opted to pay into that SDC credit fund to help improve other parks within the city. So in conclusion, the applicant agrees with the city's recommendation to approve the subdivision application. The applicant accepts city staff's recommended conditions of approval as amended in the staff report. So that revised condition 99 that Emma had on the screen, it ensures transportation network continuity with the recently constructed Dodds Farm subdivision. So again, we're providing the city requirements, which are over the top of the county's typical roadway section. So a 6-foot sidewalk instead of a 5-foot sidewalk, an additional length of travel lane, and all of those improvements to city standards can fit within the right-of-way in that revised condition. And then additionally, revised condition 63 implements fencing consistent with the boundary fencing along North Holly Street and across from the development. And it's in hopes to improve the livability for future residents. I did want to go back and address a couple things. So there was one public comment received that Emma read aloud to the commission. That comment kind of was a two-part comment. The first part was regarding the safety of the transportation network. So I just wanted to touch on that briefly. Canby Fire has confirmed the site is serviceable as designed, and the road is stubbed for future extension, including that emergency vehicle turnaround. Until surrounding land develops, the site is limited to this one access. According to the Oregon Fire Code, there could be up to 35 units built on a street until they were required to be sprinklered. And so there are other ways to help suppress fire and make sure everybody stays safe. And just wanted to reiterate that the subdivision design currently meets state and city standards. The second part of that public comment was in regards to the city's balance between development and rural aesthetic. And I just wanted to, again, reiterate that this property was currently in the UGB even prior to our recent applications for annexation and zone change. So it has been sitting in the city's UGB and slated for urban development. Recently, again, it was brought into city limits. And so this property is ready for urban development. It can have efficient public services brought into the site and be ready to serve residents. I also wanted to reiterate that the zoning that was applied to the property and at the end of 2024, it's low density residential, which was slated in the comp plan. And so these really are large lots at 7,000 square feet. You don't see these large of lots in other local jurisdictions within the Portland Metro. And so the owner is committed to having an aesthetically pleasing subdivision, and it'll be pretty similar to surrounding development, including Dodds Farms. And so we appreciate the public comment that was submitted, and I wanted to touch on that. And then I wanted to just go through briefly and answer some of the counselor questions that I heard for staff. So this is a tentative subdivision. It doesn't allow building permits. And so in the future, if this gets approved, the residents or the next phase of the subdivision would be building the public improvements, and then people would come in for design review on their homes and get those building permits pulled. We kind of touched on the pedestrian pathways already, but again, this is all slated based on city public works staff as well as DKS associates. The original plan for the subdivision was to entirely comply with the development concept plan that you saw on the screen. And through our pre-application conference as well as follow-up meetings with staff, we complied with the changing design and really wanted to provide what staff saw as the conceptual future design as they move through this UGB expansion. I did hear a comment regarding saving the trees, and so I wanted to mention that our site was arborized. We sent some staff out there, and they took the health and ratings of all the trees, measured them all. That's included in the preliminary plans there. There's an existing condition sheet as well as a tree preservation and removal sheet. You might notice as you look through the plan set that you'll see some icons for stump removal. The owner has already started over the years removing trees kind of one by one that have been in poor health. And so those stumps are now being removed. There's quite a few littered throughout the property that'll need to be further removed. And generally, the tree grove is not able to be saved. A lot of those trees along the line there that you see on the plans are actually line trees. And so some of them are off-site, or the majority of the trunk is off-site. And so the trees need to be removed in order to build the public improvements and pull the street through as well. And then lastly, I heard some comments regarding parking, and so I think I covered those. But again, the lots are planned with a 60-foot lot width and a 28-foot wide driveway. And so that'll allow generally 3 cars to park on the driveway and then 3 cars to park in a future home. Or if the property owner opts to build a 2-car garage, then there might be 5 off-street parking spaces. So our project team is available for any questions, and we appreciate the Planning Commission's time considering this application and would appreciate your approval this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate a very well presented project. Planning commissioners, do we have any questions for the applicant at this time?
I was just curious if anybody has an overlay of the surrounding parcels and what their perimeters are. It might be a planning commission ask. Everything focuses on this, but I was curious if I'd overlooked in any of the documentation.
Here's a bit of a vicinity map. Were you hoping for one that was more blown up?
I'm just curious, like, are the surrounding parcels to the north and south the agricultural areas, or is that more than one lot above it or below it? Just because when we're looking at the future plans on slide 7, with potential roads, we would have what probably is different site, like one site that would have to have a road going through it and development on either side of it to make that a reality. And to date, I've never seen anybody propose to develop on either side of a major road.
Sure. So on the vicinity map here, you can kind of see that pinch point just south of that white border of the subject site. That's the land there that if a street were stubbed there, it would kind of create those queuing issues that you'd see up to the property line.
Yeah, I understand.
And that
Can you
access spacing.
bring up slide 7, perhaps?
Oh, sure.
So I guess what I'm getting at is where we're looking at a potential future Grant Street, for example, we would have 16th coming through. Like the layout doesn't really line up with what appears to be the surrounding parcels. Usually, if everything to the left of the proposed development was one land parcel and then it needed to be subdivided, generally you just don't have streets crisscrossing and houses on either side of it that somebody within one parcel is developing. And I'm just saying that out loud as a statement because if we're looking at future possibilities, it probably wouldn't shake out that way based on the way the existing land around it is parceled up.
Sure. So kind of on, you can, it's not very easy to see here, but there is an aerial photograph that is faded back behind the lot lines there. There are larger home sites there next to Northwest Territorial up closer to the roadway. Those are large lots that are currently in Clackamas County, or some of them may be within city limits, but it's expected that those will be redeveloped in the future and become either smaller lot sizes in accordance with a future comprehensive plan map or such. But the majority of the property north, west, and south of the site, it's all bordered by one tax lot, which is currently agricultural outside the UGBN within Clackamas County. But yeah, some of these smaller lots along Northwest Territorial, those could be lots that are redeveloped. And I'll go back here to this aerial photograph that you can see. So those larger lots there along Northwest Territorial would likely become smaller or be developed with infill housing such as triplexes, fourplexes, that kind of thing. But this is all, again, dependent on a future city UGB expansion and future concept planning where zones would be realized for those homes. But I think to answer your question, that large lot that surrounds the property, that is one single lot.
That answers my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner DeRoche, any questions or comments?
I have one. Thank you. This was an excellent presentation. I really thought the graphics were, anyway, I'm a very graphic-oriented person. It really answered a lot of questions. Can you tell me, when was this PowerPoint provided to the city?
It was provided today.
Okay. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you. Commissioner Llewellyn?
Nothing at this point.
Commissioner Ewert?
Nothing at this time.
Okay.
I'm going to wait.
Commissioner Hutchinson,
Nothing, thank you.
Commissioner Ellison?
Nothing right now, thank you.
All right. So at this time, we will open the floor for proponents of the project. Do we have any proponents that would like to speak on behalf of the applicant? No. Do we have any opponents of the project that would like to speak? No. All right. Which means we don't need to move to a rebuttal. So at this time, I will close the public hearing portion of the hearing for sub 24-01 Dahlia Glen subdivision, and we will deliberate amongst the planning body. Commissioners, any discussion?
I just have a question. Why were we looking at pictures of fencing? Isn't it really way preliminary?
I kind of wondered the same thing because I thought we were dealing with just subdivision, but
Yeah, go ahead.
maybe Emma could answer that.
So it's being brought here because we needed to revise the condition of approval that existed. So, the conditions must be correct, but also because we are requesting that it veers from the standard and you basically grant an exception to allow the 6-foot fence at the property line rather than, at the yard where the yard meets the sidewalk rather than at the 15-foot setback. That is the standard per our code currently.
Could I add a little bit more to this?
Please.
The Dodge subdivision, the intent here is a Dodge subdivision on the other side of the street to match up with that, because that's already been set. That approval previously had planning commission authorization as well. So the intent here is to make them consistent. Our code is being updated on fencing code as well. This is the direction staff in this particular instance will be going in as a recommendation as well. We're trying to get the planning commission the empowerment to allow that to be consistent like it is on Dodds across the street. It does make sense to us as staff to do this, and Dodds was that way as well. So that's essentially the nutshell of it.
I guess my question is the timing of it. Is it when we do the lot subdivision that we do that?
It normally comes in when people are doing developments of individual lots. This developer is trying to do this more holistically, I think, as a market factor for the development. And I think that this is being done as more of a not lot by lot basis issue, is my sense, Commissioner Jarosh, on that, is that they're trying to thematically make this all look the same. So it's consistent.
Okay.
I think I was along the same lines as Commissioner Jarosh in terms of the hearing is for the ability to subdivide. But we've got design criteria intermixing with the issue of subdividing. So I was trying to figure out too, if we were hearing two different hearings in one hearing, or if we were, or what was going on.
Is there concern that with changes to the fencing code, they want to have this set in stone before that happens?
Yes, so this is just kind of an extra security that if they so choose, if they want to build this prior to that new code being amended, they don't have to wait for that code to be amended, say if their development happens prior to that being adopted and effective at the time. The intent of the condition is not to set any specific time at which it needs to happen, say it has to happen at public improvements prior to building and getting the building permits for the house, but rather that just kind of setting that allowance for the subdivision. Because what happens next is if this subdivision is approved, all of the houses are approved, there's a final plat process again, but the subsequent steps are staff steps, whereas we felt that this request for the fencing is really a planning commission decision. And so this is the one chance to get the planning commission commentary and approval on this rather than leave it in the staff's court, which and there's a condition, there's a standard under the subdivision code, or chapter of the code, which basically says that the planning commission can grant certain fencing allowances in a subdivision. That's a summary of the statement.
Giving the planning commission the purview over that, which we think is appropriate in this case.
And so to be clear, we've seen examples of the fencing, many different examples of the fencing. We've seen the 3-foot on an arterial street, backyard style. We've seen arborvitae built or right behind those, and then we've seen the 6-foot fence on the arterial in other neighborhoods, and that was a bone of contention potentially at some point or another. But you're saying in this particular instance that the Planning Commission is being asked to weigh in as an exception, but with the interest of matching the other neighborhood. I just want to be really clear about that. Okay.
And to jump
But
in on
why is
the,
it an exception now versus another time? That's the part I don't understand.
it sounds like maybe we won't be approving it beyond this because once it's approved as a subdivision, it's fully
Essentially,
within
the Planning Commission has authority in the circumstance here to allow that, you know, and that's, we just want it to be consistent with what it's
But
across the state.
normally, but my question is about the timing of this approval. Doesn't it normally happen later in the process?
So you all, if you approve this tonight, it will go into road improvements and then recorded plat, and then the individual lots will be permitted on the subdivision. So there's a sequence of things going on, but this is going to happen rather rapidly. And I think this is just to set the stage so that everything lines up. This developer is moving this pretty fast through the process. So I just think that's part of the reason here, again, is expeditious for that to happen, so it does end up matching without any delays.
Yeah, so Judy, whatever happens beyond this, it's going to be between the planning department
Yeah.
and the developer.
Yeah, there would be no further
Planning
review.
Commission is
Yeah.
no longer involved.
Okay, that just seems odd to me that we've approved these things as conditions later, but I must be wrong. Okay,
No, this would be the chance to do that, and it's your call on this, but we think it's the right call.
okay, thank you, Don.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments from the Planning Commission body?
Yes. So, the applicant brought up a map that showed where the city, I guess, is planning on putting the streets in this undeveloped area sometime in the future. It would have been nice to have that in our packet so that we could have seen that particular map.
Yes.
But given that particular map, I am very curious as to why the property that's right below it shows future development as a cul-de-sac, and the city decided to take away the street that was originally proposed by the applicant because there was no connectivity there, but yet you show a cul-de-sac right there. Now, if we would have allowed that street to go in as they originally proposed it, it would have probably done away with that cul-de-sac, and we would have had a connectivity there. So I'm now we have pathways, and as far as I know, the police department don't like pathways that they can't drive their cars on, and so we've created, I think, something maybe that feels good but isn't good. At least it historically hasn't been good. So I'm curious, number one, why we didn't have that future proposed map. And number two, why would we not go with a clean connectivity through there now? I mean, it would, I don't understand that. To me, it doesn't, to me, that map that was shown there doesn't look clean to me.
So we did look at, if we shadow platted, so kind of what you saw is a preliminary shadow plat. What we did prior to what you saw on the screen, or the applicant also assisted with this, of with that stub, what does a shadow plat look like? And it does need to be a cul-de-sac. You can, basically that pinch point south of the lot, you cannot connect to any road to Territorial or to Holly because they would violate access spacing. So that, to put a road to that pinch point to the south of the site, you need to create a cul-de-sac. And we did a shadow plat with the cul-de-sac to the south, which yielded much worse site layout and properties like lot design than what you saw on the screen. Again, what you saw was intended to be very preliminary conceptual plans for an area that is outside the city. You know, the intent with this application was not to create a full concept plan for that property around the property. We took with what we had in a short amount of time to plans, you know, to get some preliminary information on what's on the outside. And we looked at a couple options, and this option was decided to be the best in discussions with Public Works and with planning, based on various criteria and preferences and discussions. And what is proposed yields the most flexible options for the future.
So Commissioner Ebert, because of its proximity to the intersection of Holly and Territorial, which is a major intersection that's only going to get bigger with the growth, they're saying it's too close.
I'm not talking about coming out there. I'm just talking about, see, I wish we had that, but we don't. So I'm not talking about coming out on Territorial there. We'd still come out on Territorial on Grant, but that really doesn't show
Slide 7's a good one.
I mean, it does, but
But you also have to think about the access spacing on the local road between,
here we go.
so
Can you
once
bring that up?
you also
What
have
was
to.
it, 9? 7, 6, 5, 4, there you go. Okay, so I'm not exactly sure, and I don't remember where the original proposed street was. Now I'm getting dizzy.
Yeah.
Where the original proposed street was that came off of this new 16th Avenue that we're, pardon me?
It's Hawthorne, and Hawthorne is a squirrely street once you get on the south side of Territorial. That's why Public Works didn't want it.
No.
And the spacing
Okay,
is
you're
too.
not following what I'm
Yeah.
saying here, okay? I'm talking about this subdivision, and I'm talking about getting in and out of this subdivision in the future. Right now, you've got a cul-de-sac there. I'm not talking about coming out on Territorial. We're still going to come out on Grant. But if you were on 16th and you made a left and you came down where that cul-de-sac is at now on this picture, and you made another, right, and came out to Grant, you would have a circle that you could get. Emergency vehicles could get through there, we get through there. That seems to me like that would be smart. I'm questioning another cul-de-sac, and I'm questioning these pathways, and the original plan that they had submitted with this had a street coming about where that cul-de-sac is at, somewhere close to that. But now we've done away with that. We've got a fire truck pulling into a walkway to turn around if it needs to turn around, where we could have had it pulled into a street that would eventually go into where that cul-de-sac is at. I'm not talking about coming out on Territorial at Hawthorne or Peachtree or whatever. I'm talking about Grant coming out there. Just that, this seems to me extremely convoluted with all the crooked streets and everything else when we could have Grant basically.
One thing that you do need to consider is access space. So we've talked about access spacing to Holly and Grant, which yields, the need, right, to not allow access to in that pinch point where we're looking at the cul-de-sac. But also, you need to think about if Grant, depending on the angle which Grant goes, the spacing between Grant and Holly and adding street connections there.
Yeah, well, if Grant went straight through, nice straight line through there, it would
You might
work.
not meet access spacing then.
That's what I was talking about, is when you physically go out and stand there and look at it, it looks, from the corner of that tan building, it looks like that property line goes just about in the middle of where Grant would be. And it seems to me like good planning, rather than all this curvature and whatever we have going on here, a straight road would be a smarter thing. Now, I know that you're not the city engineers and you're not planning. I just don't understand why we would do this versus nice straight roads and easy planning. It makes utilities easy, it makes sewer, water, electric easy, less expensive for the city to put in, and now we're doing a lot of hoop-de-doing, and I just don't understand that.
My only other comment to add, again, I did not create this design, and this is intended to be very preliminary, is that, we're really focused on this one immediate area, very adjacent to the site. But, you can see in this visual here, they looked at the entire area. What about Elm and the next streets over? It yielded very different configurations for all different sections. And so I think that there is some intent there of connectivity for that whole broad area that we're looking at, north of Territorial between Holly and Birch. There's broader impacts to the general area.
Okay.
Any other comments? Okay. Will we entertain a motion? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
I have one other concern on this. I'm going to have the same concern on the next public hearing. If this does develop out, and this all becomes in part of the UGB, that traffic at Territorial and Holly is becoming a nightmare now. That's going to need a traffic light at some point. And I don't understand, we've been asking for years in the industrial park for latecomer agreements with these developers. I don't understand why we're not using those in Canby. It would sure make it, it's a city that always wants developers to pay more. That would be an easy, normal way of doing it.
Any feedback from planning staff?
Did you want? I just wanted to comment, and we have Kevin Schuick, he's representing staff as well from DKS Online, if we want to get into the discussion here. This is a small subdivision, it's not generating significant development there, it's not failing that intersection, that's the test there. To your point, and just acknowledge that in the future when development continues there, those things, when warrants are established there and traffic warrants are noted as part of other developments, that will happen. This project by itself does not, however, trigger those items.
Okay, so back to the question at hand then. Do we have a motion on sub 24-01 Dahlia Glen subdivision?
I move we accept subdivision 24-01 Dahlia Glen subdivision.
With the amended conditions.
As staff stated.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion? Any discussion needed before we take a vote?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm not opposed, the applicant is doing, I think, what they were guided to do, but I think that it's very short-sighted of the city planning. This is the key, this is the cornerstone of this whole thing. If you look at that map that we just looked at, all of the streets are going around it to accommodate everything else that we foresee in the future. And I'm not talking to just you guys, I'm talking to the city engineers or whoever. I think that it should have been laid out to the applicant in the beginning, a little bit more of a clear plan, and we could have saved a lot of dollars had we just, it's always easier to put a water line in or a sewer line in a straight line than it is to curve it around the mulberry bush. And so I'm I find this conceptual piece of this very, very frustrating.
So at this point, we still have a second. I'm gonna dare to, I'm gonna endeavor to take a vote, starting with Commissioner Jarosh,
Aye.
Commissioner Llewellyn,
No.
Commissioner Driscoll,
Aye.
Commissioner Ewert, Vice Chair Ewert, sorry.
Yes.
Commissioner Hutchinson,
Yes.
Commissioner Ellison,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. The ayes have it, 6-1, to approve sub 24-01 Dahlia Glen subdivision with specified conditions as written. Thank you very much. We're going to take a 5-minute recess so we can reset for our second hearing. R1. Next up on public hearings is CUP 24-02, Canby Adult Center, presented by Brianna Adada, Associate Planner for City of Canby. Brianna?
Hi, everyone. It is good to see everyone. My name's Brianna, Associate Planner, City of Canby, and we are here today to review the conditional use permit application 24-02, which is the relocation of the Canby Adult Center. Here are the property details. This is 1520 North Holly Street. It's actually pretty close to the other project we looked at tonight. It is already developed, as you can see. It was established as a religious facility before it was annexed in '97. So it's considered a pre-existing conditional use. Religious facilities are conditional uses in the R1 zone, which this is. So currently on the property, you have an almost 14,000 square foot building, a playground, a community garden, some shade structures, some parking, and a lot of nice green space. And I wanted to mention that they did apply to divide the lot into two parcels here. You can see the dotted line shows approximately where that partition occurred. It's currently being reviewed by the county. It will be recorded shortly. Because the two parcels will share joint facilities agreements, we don't see this as being a big issue. It mostly had to do with ownership of the properties, but they will still have a joint agreement. So here's the zoning, again, R1 low-density residential. You can see it's surrounded on most sides by more R1 low-density residential, and primarily actually is residential detached housing in that area. To the north, you have the Clackamas County properties that Emma also talked about. And the red dotted line is the UGB. And you can see, we are all within city limits to the south here, except for that one small parcel that is white. But so again, surrounded by residential. First, let me talk about conditional uses. So I just wanted to point out that community center or adult center is not specifically called out as a conditional use in the R1 zone, but given this is being reviewed by you, Planning Commission, 1616-020Q allows you to determine that the adult center use is compatible and it is similar enough to other conditional uses in the R1 zone, such as the churches, schools, hospitals, daycare, things like that. And I also wanted to point out that the current location on South Ivy of the adult center is also zoned R1. So staff does think that this is an appropriate conditional use here. So an application overview, conditional use application. The adult center would like to relocate from 1250 South Ivy Street. You can see the southern red dot there labeled existing, to 1520 North Holly Street. The northern red dot there proposed. It's an existing religious facility, as we spoke before. Canby United Methodist Church operates there. You may hear me call it CUMC. And again, the two organizations intend to share their facility. Here are the applicable criteria. We have traffic, parking, the R1 zone, which I already discussed, the conditional use criteria, and then just the type 3 application review procedure. So first we'll touch on the traffic study here. The traffic analysis letter was included with the staff reports. And this is, again, just a brief summary, but I do have the whole study here if we need to talk about it. Essentially, this was a little bit unique in that the use was existing, so the trips were being redistributed instead of new trips. So we were provided by the applicant an activity schedule, which captured the adult center uses as well as the church services, daycare, and they have small group meetings in the evening sometimes. So all of that was taken into consideration. Excuse me. So again, the trip assignments is what we were looking at, the sort of redistribution. So the analysis letter did show that no street segment or intersection, including both those intersections on Territorial, will see more than 20 new trips. And again, those aren't newly created trips, those are redistributed trips, right? So those trips existed within the city, but they weren't hitting those particular intersections. Now they will be. So we got as granular as possible here with this analysis here. So no segment of street or intersection will see more than 20 new trips. And because of that threshold, offsite analysis was not warranted based on our adoption intersection mobility standards. Excuse me. Okay, off-street parking and loading. So again, we are kind of calling this other places of public assembly. We don't have adult center or community center in our parking code, but we did kind of assume that this was comparable. So the building has a 250 seat capacity, and the requirement is one parking space per 4 seats. So it would require 63 for rounding up parking spaces on site. Currently, there are 103 standard parking spaces plus 8 handicap spaces on site. And the applicant, if anyone has visited the site or looked at the aerial, the actual striping, the physical striping there is pretty faded, so we did want to cover our bases there. The applicant has already provided financial assurance that the parking lot will be restriped before the adult center actually moves in. So we will see those bright, shiny parking spaces. Second, bicycle parking. Again, building has 250 seat capacity, and we require 1 bicycle parking space per 40 seats. So kind of a similar calculation there, but move the decimal over. So we needed 6. We would technically round that down, but we would need 6 bicycle parking spaces. And on site currently, there are already 8. So we're not requiring any more bike parking there. All right, jumping into the conditional use approval criteria. There are 4 primary criteria for a conditional use. First, proposal meets the comprehensive and development code. Second, the site is suitable given the existing conditions, natural and physical. The facility will not alter the character of the surrounding areas. And lastly, public facilities are adequate to serve the development. Our first criteria here is that the proposal meets the comprehensive plan and the development code. We've discussed already how it's met the development code so far. I wanted to point out land use element goal number 1, which was to guide the development and land and uses of land so they are orderly, efficient, aesthetically pleasing, and suitably related to one another. So just a little bit of discussion here. The City of Canby doesn't have an institutional zone, and we don't really have an abundance of large parcels where sort of an institutional use could be established. So it's actually very prudent, given, again, the detailed activity schedule that shows that the uses are complementary to one another. So that groundwork has been done there to show that they are complementary and orderly, efficient. I think it falls under that umbrella as well. Having this joint agreement will also allow the community to continue to enjoy the public amenities on site, including the garden and the playground and the beautiful green spaces. The second and third criteria I did bunch together just because the site is already developed and very, very little, actual physical change is proposed on the site. So 2 and 3, the site is suitable given the existing conditions and the facility won't alter the character of the surrounding areas. So the facility has been there for over 20 years. It's operated well within the community, providing community services and connection. And the allowed capacity of the building is much greater than the number of expected visitors at any time, given the schedule. And lastly, the institutional design of the building suits both the existing religious use and the proposed community center use. The fourth criteria here is public facilities are adequate to service the development. So as we saw in the traffic analysis, the street system can accommodate the redistributed vehicle trips, but we did want to point out that there aren't sidewalks along the Holly frontage and the western portion of the territorial frontage of the site. Typically, public improvements are required when there are substantial physical improvements proposed on-site adjacent to the public right-of-way. Therefore, very specifically, the traffic analysis explains that rerouted trips will not significantly impact the public system to the threshold that improvements would be required specifically by that traffic analysis nexus. That being said, specific to conditional uses, 1650-040 does specifically allow the Planning Commission to impose conditions which it finds necessary to avoid a detrimental impact and to otherwise protect the best interests of the surrounding area or community as a whole. Again, we are not specifically recommending that you do this. I do just want to daylight it because it is specifically a conditional use criteria. So it's a little bit different to how, say, under a design review, staff may recommend improvements. This is just a little bit different, so I wanted to make that clear. Noticing in public comment, notice of the application was sent to property owners and residents within 500 feet of the site, as well as the utility providers and partner agencies such as fire. Notice was also posted on site and published in the Canby Herald, and no comments have been submitted from the utility providers or service providers, any partnering agencies. We didn't receive any comments from agencies, but we did receive a public comment submitted March 4th, which was after the materials were published. So I will be reading it into the record. You were also provided a hard copy. Planning commissioners were provided a hard copy earlier. So if you'll just 1 second. Okay. This is a letter of public comment submitted on Hope Village Stationery, March 4th, 2025. Dear members of the Canby Planning Commission, it is with great interest that I share my support for the Canby Adult Center's conditional use permit for its new building on North Holly Street. As a provider of independent living housing to 350 seniors in Canby, Hope Village deeply values the critical services provided by the Canby Adult Center through its various programs. Many of our residents frequently partake in the center's offerings and are still able to live independently largely because of the services they receive there. With a rapidly growing, aging 65-plus population in the United States, senior service providers have never been needed more. According to the National Council on Aging, this is a quote, "Senior centers, recognized by the Older Americans Act as a community focal point, are one of the most widely used services among America's older adults. Today, more than 11,000 senior centers serve more than 1 million older adults every day in their community and neighborhoods." We have a bulleted list here, benefits of senior centers. Older adults who participate in senior center programs experience better psychological well-being across several measures compared to non-participants, including higher levels of health, increased social interaction, greater life satisfaction. 75% of participants visit their center 1 to 3 times per week and spend an average of 3.3 hours per visit. Research shows older adults who participate in senior center programs can learn to manage and delay the onset of chronic disease and experience measurable improvements in their physical, social, spiritual, emotional, mental, and economic well-being. We have a second bulleted list here. Senior center services. Senior centers connect older adults to vital community services that can help them stay healthy and independent. More than 60% of senior centers are designated focal points for delivery of OAA services, allowing older adults to access multiple services in one place. Senior centers work in partnership with other community agencies and organizations and businesses to provide access to an array of opportunities for older adults to stay safe, active, and healthy. Senior centers frequently serve as part of an emergency response. During the pandemic, senior centers were a lifeline for older adults and their communities. Senior centers offer a wide variety of programs and services, including meal and nutrition programs, information and assistance, health, fitness, and wellness programs, transportation services, public benefits counseling, employment assistance, volunteer and civic engagement opportunities, social and recreational activities, educational and arts programs, intergenerational programs. That's the end of the list. Residents of Canby are lucky to have such a robust senior center and the support they need as they age, most of whom choose to do so in place, which means community-based organizations play a vital role in supporting that living preference. The Canby Adult Center offers many benefits to the seniors of Canby, such as their meal program. They serve over 3,500 meals a month to Canby area seniors. 2/3 of these meals are delivered to seniors in their homes with 9 daily routes and some 50 volunteers involved. They are a key community partner and help provide essential supportive senior services as an independent organization. Unlike most senior centers in Clackamas County, they are a private nonprofit without any significant financial burden to the city. They have a vision for the future but need space to expand to impact even more lives. The move to North Holly Street will provide them with an opportunity to have a permanent home of their own with options to fundraise to renovate and grow. The Canby Adult Center has been crucial and effective partner to the residents of Hope Village. We are excited about the Canby Adult Center's future as they seek to position themselves for the coming wave of seniors who will need their services. The Canby Adult Center's value to this community is truly priceless. Thank you in advance for your consideration to approve this permit, which will allow the Canby Adult Center to fulfill their important mission. With appreciation, Larissa Teed, MBA MASLH, Executive Director of Hope Village. Again, I just wanted to read that because we did not have it in the written published record, so I wanted everyone to be able to hear that public comment. So based on that, as well as the facts, findings, and conclusions of the staff report, planning staff do recommend that Planning Commission approve application CP 24-02, subject to the conditions approval provided in the staff report. I didn't touch on those conditions actually because there are only two. One was that the parking lot be restriped in accordance to the financial assurance we've already collected. And second, that the use of the adult center is established in the location within a year. And that's just sort of a timeline thing. That's how long the permit is valid. So they need to start the use within a year of the approval. So those are actually the only two conditions of approval on this project. So that is the end of my presentation, and I can take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. Commissioners, any questions, starting with Commissioner DeRoche?
I have a couple, maybe just one of clarity. And so the traffic situation is that we're assuming the traffic just shifts mostly. The traffic shifts from one part of the city to the other. And so really we're only counting the additional. Is that my understanding?
So we're counting the same trips, but we quantified the redistribution.
And redistribution meaning it shifts from one part of the city to the other?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And then the other question, and do we ever talk about bus traffic versus car traffic? Because given the number of trips and things that they take, it's going to move bus traffic, those smaller kind of buses to another part of the town that maybe doesn't exist much today. Do we talk about that?
I know the applicant does have more information on that, so I would be happy to let them lead on that, and then if we have more discussion. Okay.
I'll wait on that. Thank you. That's all for me. Thank you, Brad.
Thanks.
Commissioner Llewellyn?
I guess, Don, you and I need to have a side meeting on these latecomer agreements. I mean, the whole point to those is people add to the problem as these things come in and develop. That's what those things are for, so everybody shares in those costs. I'm not going to harp on it, but I'd like to have a discussion with you, Don, in a different time and place.
Absolutely, glad to do so.
Commissioner Driscoll?
Yeah, we didn't talk about our contact with this one. I spent 2 years, my son was in the preschool there, Canby Community Preschool, that's attached to the Methodist Church for the 24-23 and 23-24 years. So I'm very intimately familiar with this site and its parking lot. I don't have any specific questions right now, but I would appreciate if we could get attachment A5 available for viewing. For later. Thank you.
attachment A5.
Yeah, it's the breakdown of the trips coming in and out. Some of the numbers don't match with other information that's been provided, and I wanted to ask questions when it was prudent.
Okay.
So the activity schedule, is that correct, A5? Okay, would you like us to bring that up on the screen?
It doesn't need to be right
Okay.
It doesn't need to be right this second necessarily.
Okay. Because
it'll
we
be-
do have it available, so I'm sorry if it wasn't available for you or
Oh,
on
no,
the
it was
screen.
available. At some point, I'd like to have a discussion about
wanna
it,
see
and
it.
I'd like other people to be able to see it.
Got it.
Well, that would be this portion, I would think. I mean, if it's
Yeah,
something.
we're happy to respond.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need to wait for the applicant to, we're happy to
Okey-dokey.
respond.
All right, well,
Yeah.
if we've got it,
Well-
let's fire it up.
I will say that the applicant is the expert on the activity schedule.
Yeah, I mean, what specific question did you have on that, Commissioner Driscoll?
So that it makes sense to other people, do we have the ability to share it? Because you guys don't have a copy in front of you, so it might not make sense to just rattle off
It's also in our files,
numbers.
so whichever is easier. Please hold.
Are we going to have a moment to go over ex parte contact, things like that? We missed that in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we do that, I will read from the script about conflict of interest and ex parte contact. At this time, I'd like to ask a member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest, please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate or abstain from hearing the present matter. Commissioner Llewellyn?
No conflict, I'll participate.
Commissioner Jarosh?
None.
Commissioner Driscoll?
No conflict.
I have no conflict. Commissioner Hutchinson, sorry.
No conflict.
Commissioner Ellison.
Okay, our lovely attorney said in the event of questioning, disclose, disclose, disclose.
Yeah.
I don't believe I have any true conflicts or ex parte contact. I'm very familiar with the property. My real estate team built a little playhouse there on the playground. I also do volunteer at the adult center. So just making everyone aware of that, but I think I'm able to participate.
Vice Chair Ewert.
I'll just state that I am a proud member of the Canby Adult Center for the last several years. I don't believe that it's going to obstruct my decision-making process tonight, so if anybody has a problem with that, speak up.
I was going to see if some of those bullet points she mentioned rubbed off on you. I don't know. I might have to attend more.
So I don't have any conflicts of interest, but my brother-in-law has volunteered at the kitchen at the adult center. My wife and brother-in-law maintained a garden at the Methodist church, and I walk my dog through their yard at least once a week.
But do you pick up?
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
So
I
as
think,
we
I
can
think
see,
we
a
just covered all the
well-used-
conflict and the ex parte all at the same time. Does everybody feel satisfied about it?
We're good.
All right. And
Just
then-
wanted to be safe.
And then I will ask, well, part of the script requires me to ask anyone, any member of the audience if they have any questions or concerns for any commissioner regarding ex parte contact or conflict of interest. Does anybody have, you've all heard, do anybody have any concerns? None? Okay, awesome. Let's move back to the
Thank
drawing.
you.
And just in context, so maybe we could have all the staff questions. Now that I see the table up here,
Yeah.
we may want the applicant to respond. Brianna was a bit ahead of me on that.
Okay.
But I
Yeah.
would like to hear what the question is, because I'm not sure if we're going to be able to respond to that.
So are we good to
Yeah.
just bring the applicant on up at
Well,
this time?
let's do that.
Let's ask the questions, and then if
Okay,
I
all right.
can't answer
We'll
them,
do the questions for staff and then
Okay.
come back to this, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking that it might be at a later point, because
Yeah, okay.
most of the questions are probably going to be, some of the questions will be best answered by the applicant.
Yeah.
The question for them, and I'll just throw it out there early, is they deliver 2,300 meals per month. They have 50 volunteers involved for this daily process, and I was curious how many of those 50 people are going to be on site, because these numbers don't seem to reflect a 50-strong volunteer group with the meals that are being prepared and delivered. The part that's a little bit more of just a conversation about the actual existing use, there wasn't a lot of detail about the preschool program. Every day at 9 in the morning, they have roughly 26 to 28 kids who are getting dropped off for class at 9 a.m. or a little bit before then. They get out at 11:50, which is right before noon. They all go out to the playground at 11:30-ish, weather permitting. And so there are roughly 30 cars of parents with young kids in tow who are under school age, plus whatever preschool kid is getting picked up and dropped off. And they are going to be going back and forth between the far right side of the building where the preschool is housed and the playground. And I'm concerned about the 40 to 50 strong parade of cars that are coming in for lunchtime in roughly that same time frame as the close of the school day, when they're going in and out for the playground, when they're ending their day, and then when they're actually leaving with their parents, because that is a very high traffic time with a bunch of small people who are not super aware of their surroundings. And all of that really leads to the allowable in and out from Holly and from Territorial. Right now, it is a two-way allowed entrance and exit, and I personally would be, I'll just cut to the chase so you know where I'm going with this at the very end. I would be recommending a condition that it needs to be established as one side is in and one side is out, and that vehicles come in off of Holly and leave onto Territorial. And that way, at the highest peak use time, when people are coming in for lunch, they are coming in away from where the children will be. They can get settled in for lunch, the children can leave, and then everybody leaves through Territorial. That way, when new people are visiting the senior center, they're not coming in where there's going to be lots of small people traffic. So I know some of that's getting ahead, but if we've got it,
No, it's
that's
great
where
to-
I was going with all of it.
It's great to give the applicant an advance
Yeah.
notice so that they're prepared. So why don't we put I don't think we're going to be able to respond.
Yeah, I don't think you can either.
But we'll let the applicant, so they can think about that. Well, there's other questions up here. We
Yeah.
want to take those as well.
And because those numbers
Okay.
aren't reflected of the parents, they're going to be dropping off and leaving. They're going to be picking up and leaving. So the numbers here are only reflecting as though they were coming in and staying. And I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on any traffic studies or anything like that, but it does significantly impact the numbers and the traffic for the ins and outs on this.
Okay, so any other questions at this time from
Not at
planning
this
staff? Planning commission, okay. And just checking in again, because Commissioner Jarosh and Llewellyn are remote, just want to double check before we move along.
No,
Any
I'm good.
other
My
questions
question
or
about the
comment?
buses, but I'll wait for
the applicant.
applicant.
I'm good.
Very well. So at this time, I think we will open the public hearing for testimony from the applicant. Will the applicant please address the planning commission?
Time frame as to who's speaking for who and so on and so forth.
Got the power.
Hello? Can you hear me? I'm not very well versed in doing this, so please forgive me. My name is Kathy Robinson. I've been the director of the Canby Adult Center for almost 16 years. And if we're all supposed to disclose and be transparent, if we succeed in this move, I live on North Grant Street. I was on your map there earlier. I'll be able to walk to work because the chair of my board was just, so there's my disclosure, but that's not the reason for this. That's just a happy coincidence. And I do, before I start, I just really want to acknowledge this is really unusual to have our community out when it's dark outside. So this to me, we also have, as a measure of support, I'm really grateful to have Mark Oldenkamp, who is the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Canby United Methodist Church, as well as Pastor Marty Williams, whose brainchild this was to begin with. So as well as 5 members of my own board of directors, and the rest of these people in here, for the most part, are faces I know and count as my friends. So Thank you for this time. This is Bob Price, our permit consultant and also a friend. I'm going to just talk briefly about what it is we do. I will address some of the concerns about the numbers as well. So my half is a touchy-feely, and Bob will get into some more of the technical things. This is us. This is a recent trip with Bigfoot in the middle. We took a group of people to go ziplining, which is not something that normally people associate with the adult center. So yes, we have traditional activities like bingo. What senior center doesn't have bingo, but we also do. Our bingo was not just for fun. It is a fundraiser for us. We operate under a charitable permit, and it nets us about $8,000 a year. But we also have fun days like this. This was our Father's Day celebration. Those are root beer floats, anybody wondering. 80 diners that day. We have transportation, and I will come back to the question on the bus in just a minute. We have just one bus. It's just a 14-passenger bus, and then we do have a wheelchair, a ramp-equipped van. We use one or the other. Those aren't both on the road circulating at the same time. But we also do stuff like this, kayaking. We do a lot of recreational trips out and about in the community. What's happening? There we go. A couple of people, Larissa Teed's letter really talked about this, fitness and wellness. This is the biggest demand that we're seeing in baby boomer generation adults. And so this is an area where we're really expanding, keep people on their feet, keep them from falling. Critical. Falls are the #1 reason that older adults go from independent housing and have to go into care. So we're all about this. We offer 4 different classes. They're listed there. And I took this picture in particular because you see how crowded they are. This is one of the major motivations behind the move that we're hoping to make. This is our most quickly expanding activity. And with the move to the North Holly Street building, we're gaining that massive, massive sanctuary that we will respectfully use as a multi-purpose space during the week. Recreation, I already kind of touched on that. We take people out to the industrial park. They got to put on hard hats. Oops, sorry. Your ticker is more sensitive than mine. Quilting group, we don't have any members of the fire department here tonight, but our quilting group regularly makes quilts that they give to the fire department for the guys who got to stay overnight. It's been touched on earlier. Nutrition is a cornerstone of our program. 2 parts to that. There's our home delivered meals program, and then our kitchen team and our dining room. And I do want to address something because you're absolutely right. My numbers weren't clear. 50 volunteers, they don't all drive every day. That's our total volunteer pool. On any given day during meals deliveries, it's 9. It's 9 vehicles a day. 9 routes, so 9 drivers. It's just we have to we've got, backups and all the rest of it. So different drivers drive different days. Clients, what does that look like? It was alluded to earlier. Last year, ending June of 2024, 47,000 meals served. 13,000 of those in our dining room, and then the rest of them were delivered to over 150 older adults in their homes. That number fluctuates, obviously. Our evidence-based exercise, you saw the list of that earlier, over 100 different participants just in the month of February. Critical service for us. Transportation, almost 300 rides for nutrition and recreation just in February. And to talk, if this number seems scary, but we have maybe 6 to 8 people who we will pick up in the circulator bus to bring in for lunch. The rest of these are off-site trips. They're trips to do things like going kayaking, going painting, going out to dinner. They aren't people coming to and from the adult center for those. Almost 25,000 recorded visits last year. This is just for, year hasn't quite ended yet, but this is through March, from almost 600 different people. This doesn't count the people who aren't yet in our system, either they're first timers, they haven't registered yet, or clients who only receive in-home care. 18% of those people visiting the center are over the age of 85. So that, to us, that's what healthy aging looks like, that they're still coming in. Time for change. Our current space, it's not the greatest picture, but I'm sure you all know where we are. We're right across the parking lot from the pool, and then the new picture of the Methodist Church. Why do we need to do this? This is the elephant in the room. It was a situation that made sense in the 1980s, but less so today. The City of Canby owns the building we're in. The school district owns the land it sits on. This has made, now that we're at the point of needing to raise almost $4 million to remodel that building, nobody's going to give us a dime of that for a building we don't own. And we started these conversations a year and a half ago with a couple of capital campaign consultants, and they told us we can't help you. So we're really stuck. And it wasn't a month later that Pastor Marty, who I did not know before, called me and said, let's get together for coffee. And that's where this dream was born. The United Methodist Church's membership has gone down, and so they really no longer make sense for them to have a dedicated building. So this is a model of repurposing, really. We're excited about that. You've seen the aerial view, I think, already. Brianna showed it. So this is what we're looking at. What's going to need to be done. The dining room is pretty much cosmetic upgrades. The kitchen will be the most expensive part of the project. We need to really build a commercial kitchen from the ground up. Sanctuary becomes a multi-purpose room during the week while respecting its continued use as a place of worship on the weekend. Going to put in some great bathrooms, reconfiguring some of the office space. A couple of minor things that will affect the exterior: an additional vestibule, an emergency generator, and an outside walk-in fridge freezer. I'm trying to get through these. This touches a little bit more on traffic. Roughly, if you look at the table that you have, on average, it's about 110 people in the building. 75 to 80% of those people are in and out outside of peak hours. And if you do look at the table, I have split out between school and the Methodist Church and the adult center about who's coming in at what times. And so we've accounted for that. Peak hours in the morning, it's all the school. That's happening already. I've met with the school's leadership to talk about the traffic issues. Most of our lunch crowd they don't scoot in there at 11:45. They're there at 10:45 to 11 o'clock because seniors, what do? Right? They grab a cup of coffee, they talk to their friends, a lot of them come in. But I absolutely acknowledge that that is something that we've already spoken with the school's leadership to talk about, making sure that we manage that safely. The flip side to that is right now, in leaving the South Ivy property, we are no longer surrounded by school zones. So yes, these are smaller children in closer space, but where we're at is not without its share of risks as well. Any direction that people go leaving our building, they're going through, well, 2 out of 3 directions are going through a school zone as well. The rest of these numbers, I think, by 3:15, we have fewer than 15 people in the building. One thing I kind of questioned with Brianna, if you want to get into the weeds on our activities, DKS indicated that our afternoon peak rides that it's 45 rides in the afternoon, and I'm not sure where that came from, other than that one day a week, we have about 40 people leaving the building after 4 o'clock, and that is, you guessed it, bingo. Tuesday afternoons, and they leave about 4:15. That group has since decided, independent of this work, they've pushed up their activities by an hour. So they're all out of the building, not at 4:15, they're out by 3:30. So that eliminates that afternoon peak. Yes, this is hard to see, but we can go back to it if people want to see it. In closing, before I turn it over to Bob, just a reminder, it's community space. The Methodist Church continues to use including office space for pastoral hours during the week. There is an afternoon Spanish-speaking church that are also welcome to remain. The Canby Community Preschool stays, as well as the 4 different 12-step programs that meet there. And finally, we intend, as part of our remodel, to equip the building to serve as an emergency shelter, which we don't have in that part of town. So, sorry, Bob. Maybe. Yes, your turn. I have a couple slides on the remodel, but there we go.
Thank you for waking me up. My name is Bob Price. My address is 3935 Northeast 72nd Avenue in Portland. I've made countless numbers of presentations and appearances before the Planning Commission on behalf of Hope Village, for whom I worked for over 10 years, handling all of their land use stuff. So Kathy thought that qualified me to help her out too, and I'm hoping it does. We had our pre-application conference with city staff on August 21st, 2024. We had our neighborhood meeting on September 17th of 2024. We had about 12 or 13 people at that meeting. They were all very enthusiastic about what the Canby Adult Center is going to do, in addition to what is happening at the facility right now, the church. People were glad that the church wasn't just going to pick up and leave. There was going to be a kind of coordinated use. Our application was deemed complete on January 13th of 2025. We posted the site on February 28th of 2025, and here we are. It's only been 7 months. The Canby Adult Center, as Kathy mentioned, is in a tough place right now. They don't own the building, they don't own the land, and as she said, fundraisers said, man, we can't help you. If you don't own something, either the land or the building, we can't help you. And so that's one of the motivators of this particular application right now, is to find something somewhere where Canby Adult Center can light and work cooperatively with other organizations, and Kathy listed those on one of her screens. It's a great deal for both the Canby Adult Center and the Canby United Methodist Church. The church originally built that building in about 1980, the early 1980s. And they occupied it before there was any such thing as a conditional use application or permit required by the city of Canby. So they've been there for years. And they've added on these other things like the school and so on. And so now comes the Canby Adult Center. And what we're doing is we're having a change of use. This isn't new development. Nothing new development. This is a change of use, a change of the primary user of the property. It's going to go from the Canby United Methodist Church, who will remain a user, to the Canby Adult Center, who will be the primary user. The building's going to remain the same. Everybody will continue to probably call it the Canby United Methodist Church property or site. But that's okay. We can live with that. But what we're trying to do is to, kind of get into a place where we can do things that'll help people. Not only seniors, but people in general. And you saw the list of users there, the Spanish organization, the school, the preschool. We're helping people. We're not just focusing on seniors. And that's important. We're going to provide something in Canby that doesn't exist anywhere else. We're just changing locations from A to B, if you will, because of the circumstances. And that's fine with us. We're going to have agreements with cross agreements with the church on the parking, the dual use of the parking area and so on. And Brianna showed the slide that had the dotted line in it for the partition. The church is going to keep the east portion. The adult center will get the west portion, but they'll work together. So it's a pretty good deal for everybody, actually. It really is. The staff has recommended approval, which we appreciate, but that's based on all the information and material that we gave them. And we're straight up with everything. We're as transparent as we can be here. That's a big term nowadays, is transparency. But we wanted to make sure that we fit, and we do. Traffic was an issue, and Kevin from DKS has done his work based on the information we gave him. And he said, you know, there's no significant impact that would cause the need for improvements or changes. And we're fine with that. If there's a need for some adjustments, if you will, as maybe Commissioner Driscoll suggested, we'll talk with the city about that. You know, maybe it is needed. We don't know yet at this point, but it might not be a bad idea. The number of trips are on your list that's in the packet. And again, Kevin reviewed all that stuff based on our information. We had some questions going back and forth. We gave him everything we could. And his determination was, this looks pretty good to me, just basically. There are four criteria, I guess, in the conditional use. I'm used to seeing 5 in most other jurisdictions. I don't know if that's good or bad. We're consistent with the policies of the comprehensive plan and the requirements of the code and the applicable policies of the city. We meet all of this stuff. Brianna noted in the staff report that the City of Canby does not have an institutional zone, where this might fit even better, if you will, in terms of land use. And it doesn't have an abundance of vacant land where a new institutional use like this could be established. So we're not going to go around taking up some other residential R1 properties to build our Canby Adult Center, but we'll leave those for additional residential development in the future. That suits us fine. We meet goal 1, if you will, of the land use element in the comprehensive plan. The characteristics of the site are suitable for the proposed use, considering the size, shape, design, location, topography, existence, and so on and so forth. This site is already developed. We're just moving in. So we're not taking up anything, and we're not abusing some criteria, if you will, about this site. This site is perfect for not only the church, but the Canby Adult Center. So we meet item B as well. The required public facilities and service exist to adequately meet the needs of the proposed development. Well, it's called development in this, but it's not a development, it's a change of use. And there's a difference between those. But regardless of that, all the facilities and services are already on the site. They already serve the site. We don't have to upgrade anything. It's all there. So, and then the final one is the proposed use will not alter the character of the surrounding areas in the manner in which substantially limits or precludes the use of surrounding properties for uses listed as permitted in the zone. Actually, the church came first. The church was there before a lot of in fact, almost all of the surrounding residential development. So who's compatible with whom? It's worked out over the years without any difficulty, the church and the residential development in the area. So given the church's change of use to the Canby Adult Center as the primary user, the character of the area stays the same. Not going to change. We're not going to do anything to change the character of the area. So we meet all 4 of those criteria for a conditional use. And we meet them pretty easily, I think. There's really not much of a question regarding that. So in the end, we're very comfortable with this particular site becoming the Canby Adult Center and remaining the Canby United Methodist Church. I think that's a great deal. We support the staff's recommendation of approval. We support the 2 conditions that Brianna has thrown out here. And believe me, the parking lot does need to be restriped. I went out and did a physical count and came up with a different number each time because I was going by the lines, and a lot of the lines are missing. So, but anyway, we settled on 103 spaces and 8 handicap spaces. And that's more than enough based on the code. So we're fine. We're in good shape. And we'll work with the church however we can, whenever we can, until they decide what they want to do in the future. We don't know, they don't know. So that's the east part of the property belongs to the church. They can decide to do what they want to do, and we'll help them out any way we can. We're getting the west half of the property. And that'll be our site. That'll be known as the Canby Adult Center in the future. Thank you, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Going to turn it to the commission body for questions. Start with over the wide world web with Commissioner Llewellyn. Any questions at this time?
No questions.
Commissioner Jarosh?
I have a few. So people that know me in Canby know that I write a lot of grant applications on behalf of the city. I've been doing it for years. Has the City of Canby applied for any grants to improve the current site?
No, not at all.
Why not?
You mean in the past or?
No, anytime.
No, they have not.
Do you know why?
Not really.
Okay. First of all, let me just say for myself, I think it's a great center and all the things you're saying about, adult centers and everything, I totally agree. But planning committee people work in the weeds. So it's not that I don't have a problem with, what you all are trying to do. I think it's fabulous. The other question I have is, when I pass by that site, I see a lot of people walking from Hope Village over to that site. I don't know if they're going for lunch or activities or whatever. Do you have numbers on how many people walk in versus drive in to the current site?
It actually is very few who are walking in. We've got maybe half a dozen who will when the weather is good. I mean, I'm at the front door seeing these people. They're not all from Hope Village, but it's also very much fair weather walking. So it very much depends on the season.
Okay. I guess just my observation when I drive by there, I see people queued up at the signal waiting to cross. Anyway. And what about, so the bus question, I saw you have one bus, but when you plan the trips, I don't know whether it's, zip lining or whatever, do you ever use a third-party travel provider that brings their own bus?
No.
Okay.
We only, our trips max out on that 14-passenger bus.
Right, for your bus, but do you ever contract with a provider that brings their own bus?
No, we do not.
Okay.
We only use our own.
And then I'm curious, because of where it is right now, and it's surrounded by, adult, 55 plus or whatever, and some more that's planned in that area. I haven't been over that area where the church is, but is that ever going to have like adult communities around there or 55 plus, or what's the plan? Is it going to be walkable for anybody that's at a retirement age, or is everybody going to have to drive there?
We talked about this at length with Hope Village, and as much as in community meetings at Hope Village, we heard people express their concern about this. When I look at our active users of the building, about 10 to 15% of them come from Hope Village. which was a lower number than I was expecting. And there are, I won't say it's an equivalent number, but certainly there are rent-controlled, different apartment complexes on the north side of town for whom we will be more convenient, not
Okay.
less convenient. I'm thinking about the apartment complexes off of North Elm, as well as a few kind of, tucked back in behind Ninth Street.
Okay. So it feels like we're moving it away from an area that has a large retirement population into an area that we don't know will have a retirement population. Is that right?
No, well, not a specifically designated retirement population. I mean, I don't have
Exactly.
demographic numbers in hand, but just seeing the growth, and we know generally the average age of people moving into Canby, I think we're pretty confident that this move 2 miles across town isn't going to affect our numbers very much.
Okay. And then, so you mentioned you thought about 10% of the people were coming from Hope Village. And is that because those are the people that are telling you they do, or how do you know that?
No, we have an electronic registration system. I pull all of these numbers that I pulled come from that. People check in every day when they come in to use the center.
And they tell you that they live in Hope Village or not?
I can pull the data, including their address.
Oh, you use their address. Okay. And so you said they were expressing concern, some of them, but what was their concern?
They're concerned about us moving farther away from Hope Village.
Because they'll have to drive.
For those few that, yes, for those people who do come or use our bus or use Cat Dial-A-Ride.
Right. So meaning it would go from what to what? I'm still not understanding why would they be concerned?
They're concerned, the people who live at Hope Village, somebody's saying back here, change, and that frankly, I think that sums it up pretty well. People don't like the fact that it's going from a spot that they recognize, but I mean, again, you heard that Hope Village has 350 people total living over there. That's a pretty, it doesn't represent the majority of Canby's older adult population. And I believe that the numbers that we have at the adult center that aren't as high as I was expecting from Hope Village is because Hope Village has, at least for the garden homes, quite a bit of activity on site. And so it isn't as many people as we thought are coming over from there to us. They have exercise classes, they're growing, adding on a healthcare provider, some other things there. So if anything, in my conversations with Director Teed over there, we see this as an opportunity to have a north side anchor for senior services and a south side anchor for senior services.
Okay. And I'm usually pretty good at reading all the, everything that was provided. I don't remember seeing that specific information about Hope Village and the impact.
Which information?
About trying to understand how many people in Hope Village use it and how many people in Hope Village are at near the current site versus, trying to understand how many people of a retirement age are at the new site. Is any of that included in your information?
No, I've not included anything specifically to Hope Village in there.
Okay, that answers the question sort of, but I will say from myself personally on the Planning Commission, I don't have enough information to vote on this tonight myself. So thank you for that.
Any other questions from Planning Commission?
Not at this time, no.
Thank you.
None, thank you.
Yes. Okay, a couple of things. Went out and visited the site several occasions, and we are the Planning Commission, so we not necessarily look at what you are, who you are, as much as what that building and that site's going to be used for. And I am curious as to what you guys' opinion or thoughts are on the sidewalk issue surrounding the property. And I realize it's a big expense, but it is something that, as a planning commission, And I realize that this isn't a change of use or whatever, okay? It's still conditional use, but it's still within our purview. Now, this building has been here for what, 40 years plus? And we don't get very many opportunities to upgrade our safety and sidewalks and whatever it may be. And so, have you guys had any discussions? We've got seniors. I think you're going to grow. I personally, I think this is a great thing for Canby, in my opinion. But I think we need to do it respectfully to the community and as far as planning is concerned. So we've got kids, we've got seniors, we got no sidewalks. We've got sidewalks on one piece of it that just ends shy of the driveway. We have no sidewalks the rest of the way down Territorial, and we have no sidewalks down Holly. Now, has there been any thought of, now we've got sidewalks on the other side of the street where Holly is concerned. But we don't have crosswalk striped across any of that intersection there at all, at Holly Territorial. So I'm just throwing it out. Have you folks had any discussion as far as that? That's a pretty big safety issue. And if we don't take the opportunity to do something about it now, we're probably not going to get that opportunity for another 40 years. So talk to me about your thoughts on that.
Let me start off by saying that when the church was originally built in about 1980, they didn't put sidewalks in because there's a 12-foot wide public utility easement adjacent to the street right-of-way. And you can't pave over a public utility easement.
Okay.
There are also trees just inside, if you will, that public utility easement. And we'd have to get rid of those trees if the idea is to move a sidewalk inside the PUE. We'd have to get rid of trees. And I think somewhere along the line, people decided they didn't want to do that. That that was not the best thing because pedestrian traffic wasn't going down that way on Territorial to Holly. Because the question would be, where were they going? And the same thing with going down Holly to Territorial. Where are they going? So I'm thinking that back in the early 80s when the church was built, there was a conscious decision not to put in sidewalks because of the existence of the 12-foot PUE that has services in it, so you can't pave over that. And then the trees that are 6 feet outside the PUE. And so that makes it very difficult to put a sidewalk in on Holly or Territorial.
If I recall from the paperwork, a sidewalk would have to be almost 20 feet in from the road to have the easement and save the trees, right? It's pretty deep in that you'd have to go for the sidewalk.
Can I clarify something? You can put a sidewalk over a PUE.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
So I went out there and took photographs, so because my memory isn't so good anymore. And we've got a sidewalk that's coming down the property that's going to belong to the Methodist Church that comes down Territorial. It ends about 20 feet abruptly before it gets to the driveway of the church, which is screaming safety issue. Something needs to be done with that. And so as far as not being able to put the sidewalk there, my feeling is not that I think that it could be done. Now, we have done in the past, and I can't remember exactly where it was at, but we did some internal sidewalks that were kind of taken away from the road, and the sidewalk was going through there. So I'm just kind of curious as to if and the thing of it is back when the building was built in the 80s, Territorial was almost a country road, okay? So again, we get into this whole pre-planning, this thinking ahead planning thing. Now we have an opportunity. Somebody back in the 80s said, well, this is, now we've caught up with it, okay? So we don't have the sidewalks that we need. We kind of do, but we don't. We've got a big corner piece now that doesn't have a sidewalk. We've got more and more people that are living out in that area. This whole thing is going to get developed. We've got sidewalk down Hawley on the opposite side, but I think we need to give some consideration. If we're going to do that, we've got to get from your side of the road in some kind of a crosswalk to the Hawley side so we can get over to that. The other thing that we've got is we've got the cars that are coming off of Hawley, and just standing there and watching them, they cut that corner. I mean, they dive right through there, going down Territorial, coming from Hawley, going down Territorial. And they don't waste any time doing it. I mean, it's not even a second thought of staying in the lane and going where they're supposed to go. So if we did have somebody walking in that parking area, and I have to say that my wife and her crew, when they walk past this property, they walk in that striped parking lane where cars are supposed to park on the curb side, and because there's no sidewalk there. So I guess my question to you is has there been any discussion at all about upgrading the safety as far as the sidewalks and whatnot are concerned?
Yes, quite frankly, that we have, and particularly as concerns that section on Territorial that you're talking about. And so I think we really are waiting for guidance from this commission on what we need to do it, and more specifically, the timing of when we need to do it, just because we've got a pretty heavy lift financially to get ourselves into that building.
Sure.
And so in all truth, I've told my board, if I were sitting on a planning commission seat, I would probably require that sidewalk along Territorial. And I hear grimaces behind me. I'm getting in trouble for that.
I can see them. They're not throwing anything. I can see them.
It almost seems as if the road has created space for that, and for whatever reason, it wasn't taken all the way down. If that were to become a condition, we would just ask for some leeway in terms of the timing of it.
Okay, very good. That's all I have.
While you can pave over a public utility easement, you can only do it with the approval of the service providers whose services are underneath there. And we've got vaults in that area. So we'd be a little concerned about maybe some of the service providers saying no. I don't know.
I think we got pull. We could probably get that done.
Little arm wrestling.
Just for clarity, what kind of time frame or flexibility would you be asking for should that become a condition?
Honestly, I have not talked this over
Okay.
with my board. I know that a couple of them, sort of informally, we were thinking like a 5-year. It's going to take us a year and a half to get in there, so.
Okay, thank you.
Along these lines, Holly gets interrupted pretty badly before you get too far off the property as far as the sidewalk service is concerned. Ivy runs all the way down to Territorial. And I know it makes a lot of sense to run the sidewalk all the way out along Territorial for long-term purposes. But as we've mentioned, that neither of those intersections on Territorial are particularly safe. And I go by them all the time, both in cars and on foot, and I don't like them at all. My tendency would be to say, let's keep people away from those if we can. And I don't know with the property line, or the subdivision that's going to happen, going to split the lot that's in process right now, how practical it is to run a sidewalk, from the parking loading area past the covered picnic area, past the children's playground, and to Ivy out there. And at that point, then, except for having to navigate around the telephone poles and the mailboxes that are in the sidewalk, you actually have direct access all the way downtown. And if you go south from this location, you really need to get not quite so far away on Holly, but you really need to get to the top of the hill to have a good place to cross safely on that street. And so, all of these things, when we start talking about the requirements of this property, they're kind of exacerbated by what happens just off the property, no matter which way you go. But really, it's a clean shot from Ivy at this point. And so anything that we can do to activate that method of getting into town and out of town on foot, I think, is going to be to anyone's benefit, because of course, exercise is excellent for everyone. Also, I want to applaud the addition of the emergency generator. It's something that I'm trying to get done at our community centers. I work for the city of Portland, and we don't have them, the police stations do. But when, natural disasters happen, people are going to go to where the help is, and I greatly appreciate you adding that amenity.
Okay. So at this time, just want to say thank you for the presentation. And I'd like to, barring any other comments or questions for the applicant, open it up for proponents to speak on behalf of the applicant. Thank you. Yep. Are there any proponents that would like to speak? You have a 3-minute time limit on behalf of the applicant? None? Are there any opponents that would like to discuss this project? I'm sorry, this case. Yes?
I'd like to say something for the Canby Adult Center.
Can you approach the microphone? Thank you.
I can talk loud enough.
Yeah.
All right.
Can you state your name and address, please?
Yeah. I'm Millie Reeser. I do live at the Hope Village. I live in the apartments. I also volunteer at the center. I do several things, Meals on Wheels. I do reception. And as a receptionist, sometimes I work 3, 4, 5 days a week, and other times it may be less. When I'm there, the people, and I know almost everybody because I've been there since 2013, that come in and out. And you're talking about the people at Hope Village. Most of the people from Hope Village that come in during the week drive. There's only maybe like 2 that do not drive. So if they're worried about Hope Village people, and Hope Village people know that I was on the board and everything, and I tell them, you can get our bus, you can get the CAT. And so most of them pretty much now are in favor of that. They're still, wish that it wasn't, but that's the way it is. But I mean, as far as the Hope Village people, I don't think you have to worry about.
All right.
And that's all I want to say. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. All right, just double checking, any opponents of this conditional use hearing? I don't see anybody that wants to speak out against this, so I take it there will be no need for a rebuttal. And with that, I'm going to close the public hearing so that this body can deliberate. And yeah, that's it. We'll close the public side of this hearing. Thank you. Commissioners?
Okay, so I was disappointed on the issue of the sidewalks, that all of the documentation we received was provided saying, hey, this is the utility easement, these are the concerns about being able to put in a sidewalk, I would have assumed, because there was nothing rebutting that you guys accepted that as truth, and that's why we weren't pushing for it. Because I agree, like, if we have an opportunity to put in a sidewalk, or at least seriously consider how could this happen, I would have expected that that was something that was included. So I was surprised that it wasn't addressed.
Understood. Bob gave several reasons why they believe, it would be difficult to put in a sidewalk. I think that's kind of a separate issue from the traffic analysis letter saying there's not a development improvement nexus for us to require it. And it's also why I specifically included that PC has that power. Just speaking as staff, we don't have that nexus in this particular case, again, because it's not a design review, right? They're doing very minor changes, but it's typically a design review where we have a cost estimate of the project, we have a cost estimate of the public improvements, we can compare those and see the direct correlation there. And so that is essentially why we, in the staff report, did not push one way or another, I suppose. We just wanted to leave it as open for you as possible. Definitely consider what Bob said, and consider that we probably could get sign off from utility providers to have that sidewalk put in the public utility easement. And so that's essentially why. It's more nuanced. So I tried to address it with as much nuance as possible, but I do still understand your question there.
Yeah, I just assumed that it wasn't possible based on the information that was provided. I missed the nuance that it was a point of discussion. So yeah, I feel like for what they're trying to do, asking them to do really heavy lifting on putting in the sidewalks is kind of a lot. I like sidewalks. I want more sidewalks. We can only put in crosswalks where there are ADA actual connections on every corner. Like the only place we can put in a crosswalk is there's already an ADA corner, there's another ADA corner. And that whole intersection of Territorial and Holly doesn't have any of that. So the city would say, we can't do anything unless it's improved, and I don't know for the excessive cost of that, if it's reasonable to put it on them, just to be able to move their building across town.
So has this been a topic of discussion at the traffic committee? Because I know you're on the traffic
Yes.
committee also.
Yeah.
She wears two hats, folks.
Yes, so I do know that they can only put in sidewalks where they've already have upgraded ADA corners. So like you only put, well, you know how they have the yellow pads set into everything, and it's a certain width and it's a certain grade. If they don't already have corners that are upgraded to have that, they cannot put in a sidewalk, or excuse me, a crosswalk. They need to have it on both sides, point A and point B, to be able to connect and make a crosswalk. So when we look at that intersection, none of that's even remotely there. So even if we make them upgrade it now, there's nothing to connect to anything else except for potentially ivy around the corner and all the way around.
Holly has a sidewalk.
The whole way up?
But it ends shortly off the property.
Yeah.
You can't.
On the other side of the street.
It ends there too.
Just a reminder, this is a closed portion of the hearing, folks. Sorry. This is a deliberation just
Are we
among
able to bring
the
up a
commissioners.
Google Street
I know it's
View?
difficult, I'm sorry.
They'll bring up the Google Street View for us.
I have to cross the street with my dog and still walk in the street for about 2 lots to stay on sidewalk.
This is the sidewalk on Holly.
Yep, and it ends, see, right there.
We're going to bring up a Google Street View.
Thank you.
And then I cross over to here, and you got about 2 lots before the sidewalk picks up on the east side.
Okay. So I guess my question is, you couldn't, this sidewalk goes all the way to the intersection with Territorial
Yes.
and Holly.
Correct.
So you couldn't make a crosswalk going across there?
They don't have the ADA,
Well, you'd have to put it in eventually.
yes, but right now, no.
Okay,
And only the city would put it in there because that's who would be responsible for it. So they'd have to come up with the money, and they cost like 20 grand a piece just for
okay,
that
so
little
if we're
corner
going to get a
piece.
sidewalk in this project, it's going to need to be an internal sidewalk, is what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying that any sidewalks we ask them to put in aren't necessarily going to connect to anything else.
Like any crosswalks.
Like
or
any other,
anything.
there won't be any crosswalks because no other corners from anywhere around it are going to have the necessary upgrades to be able to put in a crosswalk. So we would have sidewalk frontage immediately around the United Methodist Church and potentially in that stretch of greenery that goes between the end of the east side of their parking lot and the east parking lot entrance that goes onto Territorial and potentially over to Ivy if we asked them to do that too.
Well, that sidewalk is already there, except for about 20 feet.
Yeah,
This is Holly here.
this is Holly.
Yep.
And they don't have any sidewalk.
The sidewalks just curved. Going up Holly towards Memorial. Again, no sidewalk, just curved, no ADA.
Okay, and if we keep going and looking on the other side of Holly,
Of Holly.
yeah.
I see that truck all the time.
So there's nothing on the north side.
You have some Dramamine?
Yeah, let's go to the left a little bit there, and then there.
Yeah.
Can we zoom in on
See,
that
there's
one?
there's a
Is that
wheelchair
compliant?
ramp, but it's not.
It's not compliant. It doesn't have the little yellow
So
thing.
this doesn't connect from here to here? Or is that just in the shadow?
It's just a shadow.
Okay, so we got ADA there.
That's not
It's
going to
not.
be ADA compliant.
Yeah, unless
If
it
you,
has the yellow.
if it doesn't
dot.
have that yellow pad, it's not.
Okay.
So even though there's a sidewalk, it's going to have to be upgraded
Okay.
to connect to the other side of Holly and Territorial, that corner there.
Okay.
So then the question just becomes, is there any value on the Territorial stretch of the frontage? And where does the sidewalk start further down Territorial towards Ivy?
That's beyond the driveway. There's the driveway on Territorial
Yeah,
facing,
there
and
you
then
go.
that's where the,
That's where the sidewalk starts.
We've got about 20 feet right there by that sign that doesn't have anything. Right there.
Yeah, that's where it ends.
Kind of looks like it has one,
I was gonna say,
About 8 inches.
but it doesn't.
that's a trip.
That's a footpath.
I have walked that. It is not, there's not a sidewalk there, but it looks like it.
So we know
that
it's
is-
well-traveled.
Yeah,
And the corner lot on the other side of Ivy from the property is undeveloped in either direction, so you really can't.
Okay, so if
There's
we
no
go all the way
land.
down to Ivy, there's nothing to connect it
On the
to?
far side. If you can go around the corner, the near side of Ivy, you're good. But see,
yeah.
yeah, right there
There's a
is,
sidewalk there, yeah.
yeah.
But
on
it
the-
doesn't go all the way down
No.
Ivy? So once you get past the
Oh, it goes all the
garden?
way downtown.
Okay.
You can go from this, that's why I was saying if I can connect into Ivy with some sort of, I mean, internal path, it would really solve their
'Cause Ivy-
pedestrian connection issues
Ivy does
because
go all
that's
the
how
way
they
down.
would get there.
It seems like it's not
But it's like
up
all
to the
side-
standard we'd like, but it looks like there is something that allows people to walk not in the road from Ivy Territorial to the north entrance. Would we agree on that?
No,
No.
it ends up 20 feet short of the driveway,
20 feet short of the driveway, okay.
ish.
in this,
And right now, anybody that's walking from Ivy, like directions right here, down that sidewalk where then it ends about 20 feet, they gotta walk in the parking area, the striped parking area in
Correct.
between the bike lane and
Kind
the
of cut through.
curb
Yep.
to get down to the corner. And then when they get to the corner, they're on their own getting across the street
Yep,
to get to the sidewalk on Holly to go towards town.
but that's the part where we're stuck, because no matter what we might ask them to do, there's never going to be an official crosswalk to get across Holly.
Okay, but let me ask staff a question on this. I don't know how far away improvements are to the intersection at Holly and Territorial.
To the best of my knowledge, it's not on anybody's radar.
It's not even on the radar.
the CIP
Would you
and the projects.
know about that?
The transportation system plan, I believe we're looking at that. I don't have an answer for you on what the timing is, but that is part of the TSB update process that we're looking at.
Okay, so let
Updating
me
that
ask
plan?
this
Well,
question.
I don't know the exact improvement, but I think
Okay.
there are some needs there. I don't disagree. There are some needs there.
Well, after our previous approval,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that this is going to start cascading
Permeating,
here,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's going to need to be addressed sooner than later.
Yes.
So my question is what's going to be the process for these folks when that intersection does get ADA compliant and all of that good stuff, you know, a three-way stop and stoplight and all of that? What's going to be their, how does that work then that they have to put sidewalks in? What's that going to look like for them? How, in normal,
On
in
the
normal
south side
scenario?
of the road, and this is a public works question, but I will try to answer what I believe the situation to be. So obviously there'd be a design consideration on what the need would be for right-of-way in that area for, first of all, like, is there sufficient room for that, depending on that, and assuming there is, it would probably be a capital project, and it would end up being something that would be completed as a possible system development charge project. If it's not listed now, it'll probably end up on a list as a system development charge project at some point.
So they would end up paying for the sidewalk, or the city would end up
The
paying?
city would end up paying for the sidewalk, and so that would be the situation. Yeah.
Okay, that answers that question for me.
I have a follow-up if I could. So I remember on South Ivy, some of the property owners were charged an assessment. I think it was for sidewalk improvement. So why wouldn't the property owner here, which is the church, right, not the adult center, why wouldn't the property owner bear the burden of that with an assessment?
There is sidewalk along Ivy. Right now, we are looking at Territorial and Holly, which has no sidewalk facilities. Yeah.
I was just, in the past, we had some concern from the South Ivy improvement that citizens were being burdened with assessments for sidewalk approval on a totally separate, this was probably last year or the year before.
Commissioner Giroux, the only answer I can have on that, on the south side where Ivy, where the county, we're taking that road over, the county's doing the improvement on that. I can't speak to your specific issue, but I know the county is doing the improvement. I think ultimately that's going to come back to the city, and that's a county road though, on the south of 99.
Right. So the city doesn't give the property owners an assessment for improvement of sidewalks?
Not to my knowledge, and I may be.
Wow.
Yeah, that's.
I've never lived in a city that didn't do that. Okay, but the bottom line is, to me, the burden to bear is the church, not the adult center, because they're the property owners.
The partition was primarily done to transfer ownership to the Canby Adult Center. So the church will maintain ownership of the playground, community garden, green space, and a small portion of the parking lot. The Canby Adult Center will own the actual building and the western parcel where there aren't sidewalks. So yes, that may have been true in the past, but very recently ownership has changed. And so that's the current situation, is it's two separate owners.
Okay, then I have some follow-up, but I can wait.
So when I'm looking at this, given the current state of the sidewalks and the future plans as we know of them right now, the only chunk of sidewalk that to me makes a lot of sense to ask somebody to do anything with is this 20 feet of dirt on the side of the Territorial exit where that tree is and where there's no sidewalk at all right now, and just say that stretch right there that has no sidewalk whatsoever should have sidewalk. And if it all comes down to it that we lose that one tree, at least we have better visibility for people coming and going, and there's actual sidewalk there to connect to the only sidewalk that exists in the city right now. So then there's a path. There's been a small improvement. It's not going to be ridiculously expensive to put in 20 feet of sidewalk. And then there's officially a path. And then perhaps the territorial and Holly Corner gets dealt with when the city's ready to deal with it.
You make it possible to get from the facility to that sidewalk in a mobility scooter by doing that.
Yeah. So there's a path. And if you can't get there elsewise, then there's the CAT, and then there's the community center's bus that can pick people up too. So it adds some level of walkability within reason without trying to, having to saddle them with, that's hundreds of feet of sidewalk. That'll be just incredibly expensive.
I just need a little clarification because I kind of got confused between all the back and forth. If they don't put in the sidewalk now, when it comes up and it's time to be done from the transportation, all of that stuff, then it wouldn't be paid for by them, it would be paid for by the city? Okay.
This is only the intersection that we're speaking to, not the frontage along their whole site.
Okay.
Only the intersection. We're going all over the map here on this
Yes,
discussion.
that's what, yeah. That's
So
what I was confused.
literally.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's my misunderstanding, I'm sorry.
So it's really just that Holly, I'm speaking, Commissioner Ewert asked a really good question about the future improvements there. I don't know when we're going to target that. I've got to believe it's going to be in the TSB, but it would only be that intersection and that's it. It's not the entire frontage. It's only that intersection, which would be the immediate, intersection area, which would be the four corners of that. It's not going to go down the street and do the frontage improvements for this site, yeah.
That's my train of thinking is, okay, if we're asking them to do this now and this is going to be a heavy financial lift for them, then, but if we wait long enough, then the city would do it. That was but if the city's only going to do the portion.
The intersection,
pertinent
which is
portion,
a small area compared to what we're talking about here.
then to me, it makes more sense to ask for the sidewalks to be done in preparation for it being fully ADA compliant. Does that train of thought make sense?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so why would it only be the intersection?
And the reason, just a second.
Sure.
The reason I say that is because it would be a huge burden of cost, and we would be putting a sidewalk that would go nowhere, and we got to be, for now, but we got to be a little bit careful with that,
Right.
of putting a sidewalk in that's going to direct people to an intersection in our city.
Right.
That we can't put a crosswalk in, because they
Right.
got to go across to get over the other side of Holly.
Right.
And so we can't ask them to do that now.
I was thinking of your train of thought down the line, having
Down
the
the line.
groundwork there.
So-
If what's needed to have a crosswalk put in will be done, the financial cost is either going to come now or later to them.
Right.
And later is going to be more expensive than now.
But like what Dawn is saying is that when that intersection gets improved,
Right.
they're going to have to put sidewalks in on at least the territorial side. I don't know what's going to happen on the Holly side, but they will have to put sidewalks in at least on the territorial side.
Right.
That's when that intersection gets fully blown out.
Right.
Now, we could put a condition in there that states that when that intersection gets developed, that the sidewalk needs to go in. But that would just be a condition, and it would be out in the future.
Right.
Okay? So Dawn's gonna say something to this right now.
I've lost my train of thought a bit. Can you repeat that, and then I have something to ask? Go ahead.
Dawn's gonna say something to this right now.
Rewind 15 seconds of what you said.
When that intersection, we could put a condition of approval in that says when that intersection is developed, then sidewalks would need to be put in. The question that I would go with that is it going to be at their expense, or is it going to be at the city's expense?
It's not going to be at their expense. It would be the city's
Okay,
expense.
so
yes.
then
And-
I wouldn't include a condition there, but I'm going to throw out something else
Okay.
that might work, okay? I'm concerned about people coming down Holly on the sidewalk, going across, because we've got a
ADA ramp.
ADA.
And not quite ADA, but we got a ramp.
It's not really an ADA ramp, because it doesn't have the.
A non-ADA.
A non-ADA ramp.
Dimples on it.
Yeah.
We got to do
Yes, That's right. So we're coming downhill at Holly as a city, and we're kind of encouraging people that go this way, okay? Now, that's towards their property. What would happen, and we can't put a crosswalk, a striped crosswalk across that?
Not unless that corner that exists now with the kind of, the little ramp.
Okay, so let me
gets
ask you
upgraded.
this. Could we, if we restricted the parking on Territorial, right? Going, what are we going, east on Territorial? If we restricted in that lane that's there, we restricted the parking there. No parking signs along there. So now we're coming across Holly, we're coming down there, and could we, if we're not going to allow parking there, could we stripe that? So that at least we're creating a safe avenue. We're already directing people there. Right now, we've got a safety issue because people are walking there and there's nowhere for them to go once they get across. And we can't do a crosswalk because we're there.
Somebody needs to
So,
pay for the other one, yeah.
I guess my question is there something we could do in a Band-Aid type of a situation that if we had no parking along Territorial there on that side, and we just did some striping along there so that nobody parks there, but it would encourage people to walk in that safe zone there? Maybe some bollards right on the corner there to keep people.
We're drifting largely into public works,
Yeah.
like discussions.
Okay, I'm just
No, but
throwing that
it's-
out.
No, I hear you. I wish I could just completely give you an answer to that, but that's really in their realm, and they're not here tonight.
But if we had a
Yeah.
condition in there that said, maybe
Yeah.
you guys could come up with something that would work between what the project and what would work for the city, that would fall into somewhat of compliance, we would at least create a safe intersection?
I can't really commit the
Okay.
public works. I mean, again, it's not my department.
Jersey
yeah.
berries.
What's
Yeah.
that?
Do it with Jersey
I mean,
berries.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, part of this
Yeah.
is it's in a travel lane.
I'm
It's
good with that.
You know, it would be an exception to our standard, basically. But I understand what you're saying.
They'd say
I did have
on the sidewalk.
I did have a question to ask, and I know we've closed the hearing. Counselor Padden, who's in the audience, was requesting an opportunity to speak.
To this?
Clarification.
This is my time, okay.
Are we
You'd
able
have to
to?
reopen.
Hold on. Yes, yeah, that's the ask. So we'd have to reopen. You're right.
Okay, which,
Is the clarification pertinent to the discussion right now?
It is,
Okay.
yes.
I think we
Reopen
kinda
public
have to.
hearing. If you reopen it, he speaks. If anybody needs to speak to what he says, you'll have to let them do.
correct. So, should we take a motion for, no, should we just take a poll? Okay, so open or not, Commissioner Ellison?
I say we should open. They said it's pertinent to what we're discussing.
Let's open.
Open?
Yeah.
Open?
Open. Let's do it.
Commissioner DeRoche?
No, I don't think so. I think we should base it on what we have, and if we don't have it, then we delay. But that's just me.
Commissioner Llewellyn?
Say open it.
Open. All right. So at this time, we will reopen to hear Councilperson Padden's comment, and then we'll immediately close right after that again. As soon as there's no other comments, yes.
I'm sorry, this is very unusual, but I've been.
It better be good.
It's going to be super good, okay?
That's all I'm going to say.
So this is pertaining to the statements that are being made regarding the ADA ramp that would be on the opposite side of the intersection of Holly to the church, where there currently is an ADA ramp, but it is not up to current code. I can tell you that how those ramps are being updated right now is through the local gas tax. So every year, Public Works identifies a certain number of these ADA ramps to be updated. So my suspicion would be, and as a city councilor, I would advocate for such a thing amongst council, that if you worked on a condition with this group to put in the sidewalk and put in for an ADA ramp on that corner, that the city would, that I would push for the city to then update the corner on the other side, so that way there would be an adequate ADA ramp on each side of Holly, so that you could then include a striped crosswalk at that intersection. Now, Jerry might stab me in the face later on, but this is something in the project process that is going on, and so there is actual funds to be able to update. There would be funds to update that corner.
And that is a park.
Yeah.
It is a park, yes.
So are we just asking the applicant to only put in the corner piece at Holly and Territorial? Or is there other sidewalk involved? Because it would be the corner piece of sidewalk to nowhere, because right now that's all grass all along the frontage of the church on both streets.
No.
So you might have a way across,
let's wait.
but then there's nothing but grass.
I
And I
think we
will-
need to wait and
Around the
deliberate
church.
on that.
I will
before we
say
close
this is,
down.
I will say this as well, that there is a goal amongst the council to increase the walkability of our city. And taking an opportunity to update areas of the city that do not have sidewalks is something that is good. Even though the sidewalk might not connect in other areas, a sidewalk is better than no sidewalk. So that is that.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. All right, that was worth it. Is there any rebuttal to his comments? None. All right, so we're going to go ahead and close the public testimony again and continue deliberation. So you were saying?
I was just saying, I need a little bit of clarity about if we were asking for any sidewalks from the Canby Adult Center, what are the parameters of that? Are they only putting in the corner piece, or would they be asked to do anything else at this time along with it? Because we heard if they don't put in sidewalks down Holly and down Territorial, that eventually we would expect that this will be part of other city-driven improvements. But I have concerns that if they put in one piece, that there could be some degree of slippery slope of responsibility, and I wouldn't want to saddle them with that unintentionally.
So if what Councilor Padden says happens, and we improve the ADA on the Holly side that is there now, where we have sidewalk, we come across with a crosswalk, we have an ADA there, then I guess is it the city's cost to go from the ADA and connect with the sidewalk that's already down Territorial?
Along the frontage
Yes.
here.
We've already got a sidewalk that ends. Now that we have an improved intersection,
I'm listening, I'm just processing.
you're not
'cause
going to commit, are you?
I think I'm
okay.
worried we're drifting too much into stuff we can't control or speak to
No,
right now.
I don't,
It matters though, because.
it does matter.
I get it.
Because now is the time, if we're going to do it, now is the time we're going to.
But this body can't commit to answering with specificity.
Yeah.
I mean, the easy thing
You're
is
listening to
just to
planning stuff.
leave the sidewalk out of it as proposed and let the city do what the city's going to do. And we just say yay or nay.
I hesitate to request anything that's not immediately functional, because otherwise we're asking them to spend money that may or may not be used. And looking at
Yep.
the gap-tooth smile of sidewalks we have around this town,
Yep.
it may never close.
Well, I don't want them to spend
Okay.
25 grand putting
Yeah,
that corner
I
in,
mean-
and then it doesn't match up correctly with the other configurations that we'd
Yeah.
see in the future.
And if there's a code change in how we do these kind of intersections, then it'll be wrong again.
Yep.
So my tendency would be, is that if we want to activate the sidewalks around this facility, we need to fill in that 20 feet of missing. And internally, it would be nice if they could get a sidewalk that gets from the parking lot to there safely. And at least then that way, there's functionality to getting people from town to this place now. And they're not spending money on anything that I don't think would be used.
I strongly agree, and then have a question. The 20 feet that we're talking about, connecting the stretch of territorial to the north side of the church parking lot, that falls on the Methodist church. Do we have any authority on that? Because we're talking about primarily the Canby Adult Center. Is this property split a separate thing that is not part of our conversation this evening?
The partition is not part of this conversation. We could craft a condition that states the Canby Adult Center will work with CUMC to have that installed. So that's how we would phrase it.
Okay.
Very pertinent question. I appreciate it.
Because I am also agreeing with what you're saying. Out of all the discussion that's come up, that seems like the best plan forward. Just making it functional in the immediate future.
Okay, so
Any more discussion?
any more discussion on that from, well, let's start with the Commissioner Llewellyn.
No, I say let's just come up with a conditional situation for that and move on.
Okay. Well, Commissioner Jarosh?
Are you talking about discussion on the sidewalks specifically?
Just the whole thing. Where do you want to, because we're about ready to maybe start talking about a motion, but what would that look like at this point?
Yeah. I mean, to me, I hear just open-ended, the questions I have is I'm not sure I understand the urgency of timing. I'm going through that presentation and I see a lot of great things, but I don't see a compelling issue around timing. And then when one big compelling thing that was brought up was, paying for the improvements at the current site, but no one's asked the city to do a grant. And, I do this as a volunteer for the city, all the grants, I've never had one denied, ever. So it feels egregious that wasn't even asked. Anyway, there's too many open things for me.
I think it goes a lot beyond the grants for them, though, because they want to do things that building isn't capable of, and you can only make so many improvements.
I didn't see that in
They don't own the
there.
land, and they don't own the building. They want to own a building and own some land, so they can do whatever they want. To me, that's a cogent argument, like, they
Aren't
want to
they
be
gonna
somewhere
use-
where they're in control, period, the end.
Aren't they going to use the church building for some of their stuff?
But they're getting the
They'll own the
improvements that they
building.
need. They own the building. The church they have an agreement with the church that the church will still have some services, but the church no longer owns the building. The church no longer owns the majority of that parking lot.
Right.
So the church only owns the land and that
Right.
little strip of parking lot directly behind the entrance sign.
Right, but
So-
but in their presentation, they said the problem was they didn't own the building, and that's not really the problem. Nobody asked for the money. So that's,
But they don't own the land either, and no grant's going to fix that.
well, I didn't see anything that there was a problem with the land.
The city, the school owns the land. The city
Yeah, I know,
owns
but
the
in their presentation, I didn't see them mention a problem with the land.
I feel like they're constricted being in something that they don't own the land or the building.
Yeah, they just didn't make a case for that is my point. But I appreciate what you're saying, but that's their responsibility to make that case.
I heard it, for what it's worth. Okay, so specific to sidewalks, I would personally only recommend asking for an improvement on this little chunk of territorial between the end of the existing sidewalk and the entrance exit to the building. To the question that I brought up at the very beginning of this odyssey, when we were looking at the ins and the outs, the count of vehicles coming in and out, basically the community preschool traffic needs to be doubled for each, the in is also an out in the same time frame. The out is also an in the same time frame, because these are kids that are being dropped off, picked up. Parents go in, pick them up and leave. So it's not just 26 cars come in and then 3 hours later, 26 cars leave. 26 cars come in and within 15, 20 minutes, they've left.
So what are you asking for specifically
So
as a condition?
I'm not super worried about the traffic study. I wish they had caught that. It seems like an easy question. It's a school. Are they dropping off or the parents staying around? But I'm concerned about the flow of traffic within this parking lot and the timing of the events at the community center. I am very familiar with leaving the church onto Holly. Visibility is very limited if you're taking a left-hand turn. I would like to propose that we make a condition that we have a dedicated in and a dedicated out, that the dedicated in is the entrance on Holly and the dedicated out is the exit onto Territorial. I think that would work great for when people are coming and going for different events, and I think that it would help with potential visibility with people who are driving themselves and perhaps are, going to have traffic concerns from traffic coming on and off in Territorial and taking that corner on Holly.
So you're suggesting that the vehicles, let's say you're coming down from 99E, you're coming down Territorial, you turned left onto Holly, and
A left into the
you could
church.
not go in on the Territorial
Correct,
Road. You'd have to turn at the intersection
correct.
and go in there.
The visibility is good. You might
The
have.
only problem I have with that is if there is some kind of a backup in the parking lot, cars that are turning in between the stop sign, the queuing, could be an issue there.
They're still like 200 feet down the road. So even if there's one or two waiting to go,
I gotta say, I think,
don't
I think they're pretty aware of what they need to do in their property, and I think mandating what they're gonna do with the internal of their property when they've already addressed the issue.
okay.
And they talked about the time sequencing, and they very, very articulately, I thought, laid out how they were going to manage that and move schedules around and all that. Like, I would leave that to them.
I will say I was really supportive of that when you first said it, and then after they spoke about it, I felt, personally, I was like, okay, they got it, we're good. But in the beginning, I was like, yes, until she spoke to it, and then I was like, okay, they have it under control.
Yeah. I remain concerned, but I hear, I'm one vote.
All right, so do we have a motion at this point?
Mr. Chairman, I would try to make a motion. This is going to be my motion. I would add a condition that the sidewalk on Territorial to the driveway, that 20-foot missing piece needs to be fixed. But that we got a safety hazard going on there, that needs to be repaired. 20-foot of sidewalk, it's not financially going to kill anybody. But that needs to be fixed, okay? I think as far as the sidewalk issue is concerned, until somebody fixes that across there and we have a sidewalk that's going to go somewhere, and I wished I could have somebody that could tell me, once we get that piece done of the puzzle, whether or not, who's going to pay for the sidewalk that's going down Territorial. That's my, I don't know. I don't know where that comes out of the coffee fund, in the planning department, or what. But I don't know how to condition that. I don't know how to condition that if that is a,
It's not really in our jurisdiction.
it's a development thing, charge thing, then the sidewalk's going to go in anyway. So I don't know quite how to craft a condition. I guess that maybe when that intersection gets compliant, that a sidewalk will go down the Territorial side. We need to take care of that piece of business.
If we condition that attached to this application, it would be the burden of the applicant.
Would it?
Well, if we're conditioning,
Maybe we'd be just
A
telling the
stretch of
city,
sidewalk.
maybe we'd be just telling the city that if they fix that,
the city is not an applicant on this
well,
project.
okay,
so
all
we
right.
can't
So I'm not
condition the
going to,
city to do something.
I'm not going to include that then. I would like to see no parking signs put in because you're going to hear this from me on every project that goes in territorial. We've got to get the parking off of territorial from Ivy down the frontage of that property all the way to Holly. I want signs that say no on-street parking because we've got kids. I don't want kids running out from in between cars and, somebody parking there, unloading their kids, whatever. I don't want to see that. I'm not going to create that. We've already created a little bit of a problem. So my motion would be include those, what was it, 3 things? And then I think number 5, to address Commissioner Driscoll's concern, is that, and we've done this before with industrial things and whatnot, I don't see any reason why we couldn't do it here, that they have some type of internal striping for traffic flow. They're going to be striping the parking lot anyway. Just give some arrows as to which, not limiting the ingress and egress, just where people are going inside. So that would be my motion. And then also to include what staff has proposed.
So just for clarity, if there's any way we could just repeat the motion and the conditions.
Okay. I'd like to see no parking signage put along between Ivy and Holly on the property frontage. I want to see the sidewalk repaired that has got that nasty drop off there on territorial.
Installed, rather.
The whole sidewalk, crosswalk thing is really, really critical and important to me, but I don't see how we're going to get that done without the city getting off the dime and fixing that intersection in some way. So then the last thing would be internal striping to take care of directional things so we're not running over kids on the property or seniors.
Yeah, nobody.
That's my motion.
Okay. Fix the concrete, directional striping internal, no parking on frontage, Ivy to Holly on territorial. And what was the 4th thing? There was 4.
That was it, because you
That was
can't,
it, right?
you can't do the sidewalk.
Okay, all right. Okay,
Can we mandate the parking, or is that Public Works?
so
That's my question, that's the one thing I'm not,
the no parking.
stick on them.
The no parking condition, can we call that out as a planning commission or not?
When we were talking about Holly in the last application, there was no parking allowed because of its,
Minor arterial.
yeah, being minor arterial, and territorial is a bigger road, so why would territorial allow it anyway? It seems odd.
It's striped for it.
I know,
It's
but it
dangerous as
just,
all get out.
but that's what I'm saying. It might be striped for it because once upon a time it was a less traveled road, but at this point, the way
And
that
that
it,
property is already going to be tough enough to pull in and out of. If you, for some
Yes.
reason, have people parking out there to go take the kids in, drop off, whatever.
like I said, it's really hard to take a
It's really
left
hard
on the
to see
Holly.
anyway,
It's like,
so
it's not good.
We've got to get the parking off of territorial, and it might as well start here.
So my question still stands, is can we as a planning commission actually enforce that and make that a condition of
I think
approval?
we're going to need to put something in there that gives the Public Works Department that authority to say, yes, that's okay. I mean, because
And we've
that's,
done it in other areas, industrial areas. We've said no truck and trailer parking down this.
You guys
stretch.
turn on your mics, please.
Turn on your mic.
Turn on mic.
oh, Mike, yeah.
We've done it in industrial areas where we've allowed no truck and trailer parking through certain areas, just for safety reasons and site reasons and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm just, this is again going to be the Public Works Director that's going to have to implement this. So I was going to just say, if that condition is going to be baked in, it should be with concurrence from Public Works or something to that effect.
So the no parking on frontage, or on territorial frontage between Ivy and Holly, subject to,
I'd like to leave it in my motion, as stated.
Right, but subject to Public Works.
no, he doesn't want it.
Oh, okay.
So, all right,
Send the message to Public Works.
okay. So you're going to have to articulate this one more time so somebody can second you. I'm sorry.
I just need a full remotion.
The full motion.
Yes.
I make a motion to
I make a motion that we approve CPU 24-02 as submitted, was from staff, with the following conditions added. Signage along Territorial for no parking along from Ivy Street to Holly. Sidewalk repaired on the Territorial section that's missing. I don't know how else to say that. And to add directional signage and striping on site for internal vehicle traffic control.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
All right, discussion. Is there any discussion needed or points of clarity on the motion? Okay, let's put it to a vote.
Question called.
Go ahead.
No, I'm calling it. Go ahead.
You're calling what? I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Sorry.
I'm going, go ahead, put it up for a vote.
All right. Let's start with Commissioner Llewellyn.
Aye.
Commissioner DeRoche.
No, it feels rushed, and I don't understand why it's rushed, and there's more information to discuss.
Commissioner Driscoll. Commissioner Ellison.
Aye.
Commissioner Hutchinson.
Aye.
And obviously, you're an aye. And I'm an aye. So the ayes have approved 6-1. Approved CUP 24-02, Canby Adult Center with the following conditions: that the missing concrete section on Territorial connecting a sidewalk to that driveway be repaired, directional striping on premise be done to direct the flow of traffic internal the property, and no parking signage on the frontage for Territorial between Ivy and Holly. Thank you all very much. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Planning Commission.
Nice job. Oh, yeah, we do, sorry.
So quick. He's
Yeah, we're
already
not
done.
No, sorry, I know, I wasn't leaving, I was gonna sign this, but we're not done.
Yeah. Folks, if we could ask you to clear out. We still gotta finish our meeting, folks. If we can clear out, please.
Yeah, please.
All right.
Yeah, head home, good job. Yeah.
So next up, we have,
Thank you, Brianna.
thank you, Brianna.
Thank you very much.
Items of interest report from planning staff.
Yes, I will be quick. It's been a long night.
sir.
Just a few things. So next, Planning Commission on March 20.
Hold on a second. Folks, can we clear out? Bill? We're still in the rest of the meeting. Yeah, sorry. That's all right. Have a lovely evening.
Hey, my dad owned that property and sold it to the Methodist Church. That's the only reason I came. Oh.
Wow.
Could we ask him some questions?
We had no trouble on that.
Yeah.
All right. Planning Director
Just a
Hart,
few
take
things.
it
I'll
away.
keep it brief. It's been a very long night.
Yes, sir.
And so for our next Planning Commission meeting on March 24th, we're going to talk about the comp plan and urban growth boundary expansion and kind of where we're at. That's a work session. And then the following Planning Commission on April 14th, we'll get back into the fence code work session. So the fence code's coming back. So that's really it. That's all I got. That's the next 2 hearings.
Okay.
Well, they'll be less eventful, and I'll take that.
Items of interest or guidance from planning commission. So is any of the commissioners have any parting comments before we wrap or move to adjourn?
No.
Very briefly, I would like at some point if we could have a conversation about a tree code of some sort, something that addresses retaining trees on properties.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because it comes up a lot where we're losing a lot of trees. My personal opinion was that there are a lot of trees on this property that we approved earlier this evening that did not look to be in fabulous shape. But just in general, I'd like to look at it a little more critically, if we could, through our code.
And happy to have that discussion. Maybe it's been a long night tonight, but there are some limitations as well now. I mean, obviously, clear and objective standards, we could talk more about that offline, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
That's it.
that's it?
Quick, before anybody else.
All
speaks
right,
up.
we are looking to adjourn. All in favor? How about that? Aye.
Aye.
I need a second, or a first and a second, please, if that is possible.
I move we
never
close.
To motion to close?
I move we close.
So, yeah.
I second that we close.
All right, we have a second.
Yep.
Can we re-aye?
Aye.
Aye, okay, we're closed.
Just because if someone else didn't want to close it, that's why there needs to be.